Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Tetracast. This is RPG Site's weekly podcast where we get the site staff together to talk about our favorite genre of video games. I'm your host. My name is Brian Vitale. Joining me, I've got Josh Torres.
1, 2, 3, 4.
Are gonna keep counting, or is that it?
That's part of Xenoblade X song.
Brian has not played Xenoblade, so he doesn't get the reference.
My 2025 backlog alone has gotten too crazy. And you heard Adam, so Adam Vitale is here.
Hello.
We have Mikhail Mednani.
Hello.
We have Chao Min Wu.
How's it going?
And we have a little bit of an extended cast today. So joining us for the first time in a couple months, we have Josh Tolentino.
Hello there.
And joining us to talk about some of the games we're going to be covering today, we kind of have a special guest on this episode. We have Hayes Madsen, who is a writer over at Inverse, joining us today.
Hello, thank you for having me.
So we are recording this on Saturday, March 22nd. GDC has just wrapped up for the most part, and we've had several contributors to RPG Site, as well as Hayes, over from Inverse, that have just returned from the event. So that's going to be kind of one of our topics, because it's a first for our site. I think it was a first for everyone that's on this podcast who went to the event. We had a lot of preview opportunities coming out of it, a few interviews. I do know that we got to meet a few RPG Site alumni covering for their new positions, that catching up back with them over at the event at GDC. James is not here, but he does have a few other write-ups up on the site as well, who is also over there. So a lot to talk about. And of course, we've had some big major RPG releases. Of course, we've been talking about it on the podcast leading up to today. Xenoblade Chronicles F, Definitive Edition, Cross, whatever it is. And then Assassin's Creed Shadows, of course, has kind of been in the news since its frequent delays, since it was supposed to release last year and finally released just this last week. So those are all the topics we're going to be covering at the start of this podcast, and then we'll go into obviously our usual rundown of headlines and news. So Adam was over at GDC, and I know that Hayes was there as well. And then Adam, I know you met a few other people that have been on this podcast previously, though it's been a while, and contributed to RPG Site in the past. And of course, you met Alex there as well, who is our boss over at GDC. So I'll lead it off with Adam to talk about your time at the event, and then of course you can ping pong between you and Hayes about your time there.
And before that, there's a very impromptu thing. Like, it's awesome that Hayes was able to join us here on the Tetracast, and that was something that I guess you Hayes and Adam, I think, met for the first time potentially in person at GDC, and you kind of got this whole getting you on the podcast together. Like, it's really cool just to see you here, because I've read some of your stuff throughout Inverse and other outlets, and it's just it's really cool to kind of meet you here and get to speak with you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think we met at Summer Game Fest last year for the
Yeah,
first
we did.
time, right?
Yep, Summer
Okay.
Game Fest.
Yeah, but we definitely talked about this during GDC, so that's how that kind of came together.
Mhm. That's cool.
Yeah, I mean,
That's cool.
it was very obvious if you follow Hayes on social media or even just talk to him that, like I said, he's a big RPG nerd like we are. Plays practically most of the big games that come out, both Western games and Japanese games, it seems. So felt like an obvious, hey, you should come talk with us sometimes. Especially on a day like today where we have some big games to talk about. As for GDC, like you said, Brian, this is my first time going. I believe this is Hayes' first time going. We were actually invited to participate by some of the PR people that we work with regularly. And at first, my thought was I didn't know if it was something I wanted to do, because it wasn't something I had really planned to do. But we went, James and I, representing RPG Site. Obviously, you got to meet some of the other media people, like Hayes, who attended the event. A lot of developers, and there are both some demo opportunities, like there are at like an E3 or a Summer Game Fest. But what sets GDC apart, makes it a little different, is that there are more like panels and lectures from developers talking about various components to game development, game design, and even maybe the less technical things in terms of just game studios and this whole industry. For example, there was a talk from Teruki Endo from Square Enix talking about the battle design to Final Fantasy VII Remake Rebirth. There were various talks from the Atlas team talking about Metaphor Refantasio. There was a battle discussion and a user interface, a UI discussion, which I think Hayes will agree that was probably the best talk I went to, and I only caught half of it. What did you think of that talk?
The Metaphor one was definitely the standout. It started out with them showing a bunch of prototype concepts for UI style. I think there was 5 they did. There was like a parchment-inspired style, like a classic RPG, one based around anxiety, and it was very cool to just see kind of like different visual styles, very different visual styles that game went through before it landed on one. And they had said that in terms of the UI design, at one point, Hatsura Hashino basically told them, like, forget about Persona. Just stop thinking about Persona and do something different. And one of the really interesting details is actually that the UI designer, this is the first game he's ever worked on. He's worked exclusively in advertising up until now.
Okay. Wow, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I really love the thing about GDC is that eventually they usually time gate these panels, but at some point they release them online for free to preserve perpetuity pretty much. So like it's not like something that like like these really valuable panels about game development isn't like something like you have to exclusively travel out to experience them. It's like eventually they do get released online. I think through their portal, in-house portal, and like you can go watch them at your own time. And it's just always valuable, especially as the games have gone on with video games. That like sharing that knowledge and getting different perspectives throughout every aspect of the industry of like how different teams of developers or even indie developers like solo developers like tackle their own set of challenges and like things to keep in mind when you're designing your own project.
I don't
Yeah.
think they like have the same person coming like every time to repeat telling about the same thing, right? It's always like a
No,
different.
no. It's usually always like it's like it could be the same person sometimes. Like it might be like Harada from Tekken. He might be talking about like another like new Tekken and like the development that went into that. But it's not like repetitive. Of course, they're gonna like get different developers, and since there's always new games coming out, talk about like the latest projects and like what challenges they face with the latest projects, what obstacles, hurdles, and things they thought about when they were developing these still relatively brand new games that released on the market.
Yeah, I'm not sure the exact rules for like which talks get like vaulted. They have like the GDC vault, but all the major ones should be there eventually.
Yeah,
So
yeah. I
Part of
remember
what's
like
interesting. Oh, go ahead.
uh, yeah, I just remember like say for example there was like a near panel at GDC like years ago that I still remember I watched like maybe 2 years ago I rewatched that panel about like the development of I forgot which year it was, but they definitely had a GDC panel talking about the development of one of those games. It's great that's not lost to time. It's gonna be there. Anyway, go on.
Yeah.
Sorry, here's
Part of what's interesting is how these panels come together, because a lot of them are like GDC, the organization, reaches out to companies. They're like, hey, we'd love for you to do a panel on this or a session on this. Like the Final Fantasy VII Rebirth panel, that was the case, where they had reached out to Square Enix and wanted them to do a battle system panel. And I talked to Teruki Endo, and funnily enough, he, when they first asked them, he was like, does anyone want to actually hear me talk about this? I don't think anyone really cares to hear from me. Uh, Apparently Hamaguchi had to convince him to go and give this session, and then it turned out to be wildly popular, and there were tons of people that wanted to talk to him at GDC.
that's an interesting perspective. Yeah, because like to I just never really thought about that in terms of like how the game developers themselves like whether they think this is valuable or not to go out and like host these panels and kind of have that not self depreciation, but like that mentality of like, does anyone care about what I have to say on this? I wonder what it is to them. Maybe to them it's just like I did this project, did my job, and then like I'm ready to tack on to the next one. Like I wonder. It got me thinking right now about like man, it's like I don't know. I don't know. It's just one of those things that to me, I'm just like, I love this kind of shit. I love hearing both big and small from developers about like from their own personal lens about like how they see their project as the one creating them, not necessarily as someone on the sidelines, not necessarily someone from media, someone as like, is it just like, a typical run of the mill project to them, or is it something like this is I'm aiming to create like my magnum opus? So it's obviously a case by case thing with any sort of game.
I have two things to say. I went to the Metaphor Atlas. They actually had two different panels. They had the UI panel, which was great. They also had like kind of like a mechanics battle system panel. Not necessarily pure battle system, but just kind of like battle design and more like mechanical design in Metaphor. And I actually really like this one. This is a little bit more mechanical, a little bit more nerdy, I guess. But I've actually said this on this podcast before, where I think one of the core design components of an RPG is resource management. Just broadly, any RPG, there's usually some component of resource management that plays into it, whether it's HP, items, MP, stamina, time, things like that. And literally in this battle panel, I forget his name, but the lead battle planner for Atlas at Atlas, who's worked on Shin Megami Tensei Nocturne and Persona 4, Persona 5, and Metaphor, literally has a slide just declaring RPGs are resource management games. And I was like, this guy gets it,
Mm-hmm.
And that talk was a little bit more into the the design of like how Metaphor Fantasio has like the action battle system and the turn-based component to it. And just two examples. One, originally there was a way to beat any enemy in Metaphor Refantasio using like the action battle. No matter what their level was, you could just grind it out. I mean, maybe not the best way to phrase it, but you could, if you were careful, just beat enemies without ever going into the turn-based mode. That was originally part of the design. But then what they ended up realizing with playtesting is that like the playtesters would try to avoid like the turn-based stuff as much as possible because they were trying to like be over cautious about conserving MP and things like that. Where even if it was like way easier to beat them in the turn-based mode, and really what you should have done, players were just were trying to avoid it and kind of making it harder on themselves without realizing it. And they adjusted it to what it is in the final version, where if an enemy is weak enough, you can beat them in the action mode, or you can do this kind of get this like preemptive strike, right? And get the advantage. And then they talked a little bit about the how they fine-tuned how you can get advantage or not, and how well that works. How they added like the retry option in battle. And they even said like they understand that the retry option can be a little bit like cheating if things aren't going your way, if you're trying to get like a lucky hit or a lucky steal or something like that. And they were like, you know what? If players want to cheat the game just a little bit using this retry option, if that's what makes it fun to them to do that, we're gonna leave it in there.
That's interesting. Yeah, I'm glad that there's like a acknowledgement of that, and then saying like, you know what, if that's how they wanna if that's how people wanna enjoy it, that's totally fine with us.
And one more thing too,
as design, cool.
They were talking about how they did their playtesting, and how I guess my inference is how they have how a lot of companies do it, and how Atlas used to do it was like you'd have playtesters come in, and they would playtest parts of the game, and then they would have to like write up a report about like what they thought, and then after the report was written, the battle planners or the dungeon designers or whoever would have to like read the reports. And basically, this actually got some chuckles from the crowd. Like, no one wants to write reports. No one wants to read reports. And even if it's about like playtesting, and what also playtesters kind of felt like they had to write something, and it was a little bit hard for the designers to know like what was something that was like a genuine thought or something that was just kind of written down out of like some sort of sense of obligation to write something down. And what they ended up doing was they ended up incorporating this sort of like internal live streaming, where the testers would play the game just kind of naturally, and they would be streaming it, and like a battle designer could just be working on their own stuff as a battle designer elsewhere, but then they could like on the second monitor watch the live stream of the tester, and the tester could talk about like what they're thinking about in the moment, and the battle designer could watch them, see what they do. And they talked about things like, they designed a boss to be defeated in 6 turns or whatever, but then they realized, oh, the battle or the testers are beating it in 3 turns. I think we made the boss too easy, and we're gonna turn that up, or we're gonna adjust that. And that's something that wouldn't necessarily come through in a report.
Yeah,
And
that's a
so,
really smart way to like utilize like using internal live streaming to like drive that process.
and
That's
also,
really smart.
and
Holy
also,
crap.
and also, because no one was writing reports and no one was reading reports, like the developers could kind of like watch the live streams at will, and then work on their own stuff, in the meantime. And it was actually like more efficient that way.
Yeah,
So
because you're
stuff like that.
multitasking. Yeah,
Mhm.
I get it.
Rather than
Yeah.
having to like block off time and be like, all right, time to read those QA reports. Ugh.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up testing actually, because went to another panel that was about how Obsidian has, during the development of Avowed, they gave their QA testers more of an active role in development. There was a whole panel about how they taught their QA testers to use actual development tools, and they similarly would have these sessions where a couple QA testers would walk through quests with quest designers, go through every part of the quest and how it was designed to kind of give a sense of how that narrative could play out. And the QA testers would help the narrative designers by suggesting things to break it, that they wouldn't normally think about. And it got to the point where they had an external QA studio that was doing testing on top of their internal team. So they would have their external QA testing doing what they call black box testing, which is just playing the game from the player perspective and trying to break it from there. And they would send that to the internal QA team, who would then do gray box testing, which is testing it in the design tools. And so the QA testers could then go through and do that and actually change and fix the issues that pop up on the fly. So that didn't even have to go to the dev team. And it drastically sped up the development process because they could squash bugs and fix bugs without even, like I said, without dev team ever having to touch them.
That's smart. That's also really cool. Like kind of giving more tools to the QA testers themselves, so you don't have to like make more work for like other like the internal dev team. Like just so they can kind of address issues that they in real time encounter, and like, okay, I have the know-how to navigate around it.
Yeah, and I think that's what's really cool about GDC in my mind, is that you get optional ways of looking at games and how they're made that you might not normally think about. And it's kind of a mix of, some stuff is surface level, high concept, other stuff is really nitty gritty, talking about actual nav meshes and dialogue trees and things like
Yeah,
that. So
video games aren't. It turns out video games aren't developed just out of magic and out of someone's thoughts, and it's just like it's just ta-da right there. It's like wow, there's like a billion processes to go through, and the way you tackle each of them is it wildly varies from developer to developer. Like even though you might have a similar tool set, the way that you utilize them, the way that you and how it corresponds with your game and your game design, it's like the possibilities are endless in how people tackle.
I think it also helps to
Hayes,
contribute to like the fact that Obsidian does try to integrate their QA team like that. You see people who are former QA or current QA, and usually once they're moved on from the position or on another company, they talk about how they're treated like second class citizens or outside of the purview of the developers. And then you see this being picked up by not critics really, but by people in general who say, well, QA isn't real dev. if you're QA, that doesn't count, quote unquote. Where it's like, no, why shouldn't it count? We should integrate them. We should give them, a seat at the table is kind of stating it maybe a bit too poetically, but it shows the improvement in the efficiency and in the effectiveness of that when you really do integrate them in that way and say, no, they are a branch of our dev team, just like any other, just like
I think
artists
most
and
development
programmers.
studios would agree that like our game
Yeah.
couldn't be as good as it could be without these people who helped test us for this. Without them, our
Yeah,
game would be at a more devastating state. It would not be as good as it is.
100%. Yeah, and that specific panel was obviously from Obsidian's perspective, but it was kind of just making the case that QA developers can use the tools of whichever game they're on, even to a small degree, that could help.
Yeah. Were there any other like standout panels that like you attended or that you saw that's like, oh, like I didn't expect that to be here, or that's really cool that they're doing a panel on like this specific topic?
I guess I can just say one real quick, and then
Yeah.
Adam, if you have any others. I went to one on designing the endings of Cyberpunk 2077.
Okay.
That was really interesting. It was very in depth, but it basically was about like making sure that endings don't betray the player expectations and don't betray the themes of the game. They opened it with, instead of trying to please everyone, we decided to try and piss off as few people as possible when making the endings. And one of the core things they talk about is how every ending in Cyberpunk deliberately switches the perspective from first person to third person to signify like the end of V's story, and that the controls being taken away from the player. So instead of being the participant, you're now the viewer watching the choices that you made, what effect they've had. So it was a lot of like conceptual stuff that I thought was very cool. And endings is the kind of thing that like there's a lot of thought that goes into that.
Yeah, I imagine they like a lot of that presentation was like talking about like the building blocks to kind of make it so you reach an ending organically, and not making it so like it came out of nowhere.
Yeah,
And
100%.
thinking about narrative structure, and yeah, that's really fascinating.
So not a panel, but on Wednesday they had the awards, both the Indie Awards and the GDC Awards, and there's a lot of award shows, right? But I would actually recommend, if it's available to watch later, watch Sam Lake's. He got the Lifetime Achievement Award.
Awesome.
Yeah, watch his little acceptance speech for it. It's a really good speech. Some people were crying. So
That's how you know
Yeah.
it's a good speech.
Yeah, I would want to spend like 10 billion hours talking about your GDC visit on this, but I know we're limited on time here. But just in general, like just when you're walking around the floor there, speaking with people, I know, and it's undeniable. You can't escape it. It's definitely the reality that we face in various aspects of the game industry. Kind of the two of the main concerns there are the prevent like AI is getting more prevalent in the game industry, and also just the general like ongoing layoffs going on in the game industry. Like, did you guys were able to speak to anyone or get a certain vibe or sense of like how people are faring out there?
What I'll say is the panels on unionization were swamped.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Absolutely. I didn't get to go to any of them, but absolutely like the busiest panels, lines wrapped around the hallways. CWA, which just announced a industry-wide union, was also at a booth there, and they were swamped too. So that's kind of the observation I have.
Yeah, wasn't that it's like for Canada and or in the US, and it's like even for former game developers can be involved in that initiative too, I think.
Yeah, it's an open union to the industry, so
Okay,
anyone who's part of the game industry can join it.
nice. Okay. Yeah, but if you can, if it's feasible, definitely look into union options, because that's the only way you can really kind of fight this right now. It seems devastating. It's
I think
heartbreaking.
Hayes can relate. I got a bunch of like invites to like AI different, demos or presentations or whatever, and I just ignored most of them. I think Hayes can relate. Like, not really interested in that.
Yeah.
Um,
I've got at least 24 invites.
Yeah.
And as for like games media, even at the there's been layoffs everywhere, but like even during the awards session, Alexa, the host, made jokes like, it's kind of like, it's levity but it's serious, right? Where she's like, I know games media is here, all 5 of you. So like, it's a joke, but it's also just kind of like an acknowledgement of the reality of things, unfortunately. So but there was definitely mention of, like, I went to a panel from a former writer, Natalie, who wrote for our site, and she does PR now. Her panel was about mentorship and talking about like junior. This is in the game. This was specifically for game writers, like writing into narrative development, things like that, and talking about like, hey, this industry is hard to get into, and probably harder than it's ever been to get into, and is not the most stable right now, and that's an understatement. So that was just one example of one talk that was kind of like acknowledging this situation. Absolutely. And that was definitely present throughout.
Yeah, good on her, that she's come a long way, had a really tough journey, and it's good to see her up there talking about it.
And you got to meet a few other alumni too, as one little punctuation point on this talk.
Yeah, Aaron wrote for RPG Site a decade ago, a long time ago. Josh did a review with her once.
Yeah, we did the Zero Time Dilemma as like a co-review where we had 2 different platforms. That was maybe more experimental back in the day, and that kind of stuff. But Aaron is awesome.
Ran into her for the first time. I've known her for like 15 years and ran into her in person. So that's always great. That's honestly like a big reason to go to these sorts of things, is to meet people like that.
Networking, getting caught up back up. How is she?
She's great. She actually wrote some previews for us, which we'll talk about later, which is great to have her on the site again. But yeah, it was great.
Yeah, it's always kind of like a weird thing, like, because GDC used to be like a more like smaller event, of course, but it was very game developer focused. But they didn't like the media opportunities to go check out like demos or like for games media thing it's like a recent development for GDC. I don't remember it being.
The media presence is definitely a bit smaller than other things I've done.
Yeah,
it's more developer presence.
Yeah, that's why it's always like a weird thing. It's like I always kind of get weirded out by I get it, but it's also like, man, I wonder how like game developers or like the target audience traditionally feels about like having more media events happening there as well.
I think it's interesting too, because there's less trade publications now. There's a lot of general game sites out there, but there's less in terms of actual like development and trade publications. So
yeah,
it's an interesting mix to find who goes in depth on stuff and who's surface level, and it's just an interesting blend of people at GDC, I think.
And since this was both your first time there, like, how was the venue, general location? How'd that go?
I've actually been to Moscone. This is held at Moscone Convention Center in San Francisco. I actually have been there before, like 10 years ago, for my research positions. And it's changed a bit since then, of course. It's largely the same. It's a pretty good venue, I would say. It's, in the middle of San Francisco and everything that entails. But, there's a nice, like, park area right next to the convention center, which is basically where everyone hangs out. And that's honestly a pretty nice place just to kind of like, whether you're meeting with people, whether casually or even semi-professionally, like, hey, let's go meet at the gardens, just literally just across the street, and things like that. Plenty of food.
There's a ton of hotels nearby too, and most of my appointments were at hotels and not actually in the Moscone Center.
Okay, got it.
And I feel like that's true for a lot of events, but especially here, just, certain developers, especially smaller developers, they want to take advantage of everyone being in one city at this time.
Yeah, they don't have like
But
an E3 anymore. People are trying to find more of these outside of Summer Games Fest, trying to find more of these networking events.
mhm.
Yeah,
Mhm.
makes sense. That's I'd love to hear more about GDC, but we
We
got
should
a
move
lot of
on.
other things to talk. Yeah. But is there anything else like you guys want to mention here before we move on?
As far as our website goes, RPG site, we have a few previews up. We have an interview up with the Clair Obscur producer. We have more stuff kind of in the works that'll go up over the next couple days, next week or so. So different demos that we saw, different people that we talked to, and I'll plug Inverse as well. I'm sure Hayes said he talked to
Yes.
Endo for an
Yeah,
interview. I'm not
Yeah.
sure if that's up yet.
there's a couple things I can't talk about, but what I can say will be going up next week is, I had an exclusive interview with Teruki Endo, the battle director of Rebirth.
Very cool.
And then I got a pretty extensive look at Phantom Blade Zero as well, and talked to the CEO of the game. So that was very interesting. So those
Nice.
two are kind of like the big things I'll have going up next week.
All right, so yeah, and that'll be all up on Inverse, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay, cool.
Inverse.com.
Got it. So, be on the lookout for those.
So obviously we'll talk a little bit more about GDC in the context of the previews and interviews that are already up on RPG site. And then I know if you go into our drafts, I see a bunch that are still in the works. So by the time this podcast is published and you guys are listening to it, probably more than will be up, but they'll be probably filtering in as Adam and James also get into publishing those interviews and those previews for a bunch of different games that we're excited about. But before we go into those, we'll go into probably the biggest release for our site's purview for this week. Of course, that Xenoblade Chronicles Cross, the definitive edition. Finally, the black sheep, the final game that was stuck, behind bars on the Wii U. It's available on Switch. People are revisiting it. People are playing it for the first time after playing the rest of the trilogy. Of course, the series, Nintendo as a publisher, just the video game space in general is in such a different space than it was, 10 years ago when this first released on the Wii U in 2015. Back then, it was kind of like this sequel, not a sequel. Now it's kind of this spin-off, not a spin-off sort of thing. So we talked about this in the preview context a few weeks back. We have the review up on the site. Cullen Black wrote that for us. Unfortunately, Cullen had a personal he had another commitment, so he couldn't make the podcast today. But he wrote the written review up on our RPG site from the perspective of someone who played the Wii U version of the game, bounced off of it, and then revisited the definitive edition and really, really enjoyed it. But for this podcast, I do know that Adam, Hayes, Josh, and others have played either the original game or been making their way through the remake. So I'll start off with Adam because you were kind of our point of view for the remake for the preview a few weeks back. We'll get Hayes's input, and then we'll get other people's input who played the original. And I'll just sit back because, as you could tell from me not understanding what Josh is referencing, I'm just a listener here because I have not played the original or the remake, but I'm eager to get to both.
I'm
So
just gonna
Adam,
ask you
I know you
guys,
did not.
is there any
Go ahead.
reason to own a Wii U now? Since this game's been ported, is there any better reasons to own one now?
I guess if you want to play
It has
Yoshi's Woolly World, yeah.
Star Fox Zero.
It has the good Mario Maker. I still like that more than the one we got on Switch.
Yeah, you're right. I was thinking,
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? You're totally right. Super Mario Maker. That's the reason.
Damn, I still can't
Yeah.
pawn this thing.
I mean, I'll
But
say the
Adam,
obvious things. I'll say the obvious things. So obviously, when Xenoblade Cross first released, it was the second Xenoblade game, and I think it caught some people off guard because it is quite different from the first Xenoblade game in terms of like structure and progression and style. Obviously, it's similar in ways, like the combat is similar and things like that, but it's got a different flavor to it. Compared to Xenoblade 1 and then even the games that came out later, right? And I know Josh reviewed the original version. He really appreciated it at the time, so he got it. And, I think with this re-release, people like Cullen, who wrote the review for us, it's on our site, you can go read it right now. I think this is going to be a relatively common approach where he played the original release. He didn't really get it. He didn't really gel with it and actually bounced off of it. And then he's coming back to it now with kind of better better context about like, oh, okay, I understand, my expectations are calibrated about what this kind of game is. He heard like what we would say about the game and other people would say about the game about like, you know, what should your expectations be? It is a little different, and things like that. So he really liked it. And if you go read his review, he talks about, you know, everything. It's a very in-depth review about the game. We'll talk about the game generally first. I guess the one thing that I'll say that I feel like a lot of people kind of key in on who really appreciate this game is that the world of Mira is the star. It's there is a story, like a front to back story. It's not as prevalent as other Xenoblade games or even like other JRPGs, but like the world exploration, the side quests, the dialogues that you have, most of them optional, most of them not on like the main path, and basically exploring this world and learning about its mysteries, and both in a narrative sense and in like just a wanderlust sense, are basically like the highlights here. Would you agree, Hayes?
Yeah, I actually want to jump on that because I did play the original. I didn't beat it on the Wii U. I played like 60 hours. But I think the thing that jumps out the most to me about this game, playing it 10 years later, is actually the story. And I would go so far as to say this is my second favorite story in the Xenoblade franchise after Xenoblade 3. And I think the reason for that is, like you said, it's told completely differently than every other game in the franchise. It's all about exploration. It's all about side questing, talking to NPCs, seeing the city of New Los Angeles grow. But I think that it digs into some really interesting ideas and themes, especially in the way that you see the city adapt to this alien planet. And as you progress further through the game, you know, you meet various alien races, and they come to live in New LA. And there's some really big themes of like integration of different cultures and learning to work together. And it's not all good. Like there are side quests where like humans are murdering some of the alien races that have started living in New Los Angeles, or like there's a church that is tricking this alien race called the Manon into thinking that like there's this holy water that can cure all their diseases.
Oh,
So,
yep.
like there's some really heavy topical stuff that comes, but it's all told through NPC dialogue or side quests. You're not getting it in those main story quests and cutscenes like the rest of the Xenoblade series. But I think the storytelling here is incredibly ambitious. It's just packaged in a different way.
Yeah, it's not mandatory or fed to you. Yeah, go for it. Sorry.
I've always appreciated that sort of storytelling that's a little bit more like non-linear, like not just, you know, a linear sequence of cutscenes that most games are, but, you know, based on who you interact with and who you talk to, maybe a bit more vignette style. And coming from Xenoblade 1, it definitely is a different kind of approach. But I agree with Hayes 100%. I actually think it is one of the most interesting narratives, but it is just kind of approached differently than the other Xenoblade games. As far as some of the new content goes, baked into like the main part of the game, there's a couple of new characters. They've showed them in some of the trailers and whatnot. One of the characters is Neil Nail, who I guess was actually like referenced in the original game, and maybe some of the additional materials that came out around that time reference this more than I was aware of. But Neil Nail is actually one of the new party members that you can get partway through the game, and she's a Clarion, and that's another race that was in the original game. But I actually really liked her affinity quests because it actually it kind of brings a little bit more light to the Clarion race and how they operate and fit in to everything else. And I actually think that's kind of like a smart addition to the definitive edition, because of all of the themes in Xenoblade Cross, talking about like these different races on this alien planet, and, you know, different customs and different ways of living and ways of being. I felt like that actually her quest actually kind of fit into that pretty well.
Yeah, and I think the way that the new characters are integrated, I can't remember the other new character's name, the pilot that you get.
Liesel or Liesel.
Liesel, that's it. But the way that they're integrated, if you had never played the original game and you didn't know that they were new, you would have no idea. I mean, it feels like a seamless part of the game.
And some people may not realize that HB, Bose, and someone else are actually also technically like additional characters because they were DLC for the Wii U version in Japan, but when we got the English version, they were just baked in already.
I forgot they were originally DLC. Yeah, that's right.
So if you're wondering why HB's heart to hearts don't clear nodes on the map like other people's do, it's because he's technically like a DLC character. You would never know in the West. It's HB, Bose, and Yelv, I think. I might be wrong, but there's a couple. Anyways, my point is, to Hayes' point, is that they're built into the game, but the way the game's party characters work is they're all kind of optional in a sense. You know, you kind of run into them and do their quests as you happen to run into them, right? So
they have their own things that they do.
I'm only like maybe 15 hours in this game because I bought it and got some time into it. I don't know if it's me. I feel like the weird one. I mean, I get it why I'm like this, but I'm still trying to get used to the new models in this game, like the new character models, because they're a lot more, in line with like the style of like the other Xenoblades, and so like they're less doll like, less like kind of fucked up looking like in the original, and like I guess I've subconsciously became so used to those that now these new models look weird to me. That I'm trying to like adjust to them still. 15 hours in, and after all the promotional material, then I'm like, man, Alma and Lynn still look weird to me. I don't get it. Maybe it's just me.
Yeah, I get that. The original game had more of like a not gritty, but like kind of hardline sci-fi look,
Yeah.
And like you said, this kind of puts it in line with the other Xenoblade games, which I get. I get why they want to do that. It makes sense.
Yeah. So I for me, I'm still trying to get used to that, and I think as when this game first came out, of course, open world games were still a thing when this game came out, but the amount of open world games that we've gotten from that original release till now have like I feel like has become exponential because open world has become more and more popular as a game design and format in general since that original release. So this game, like, I was wondering, like, will I appreciate this game less because I still hold the original game, because I still held the original game like in very very high regard as like one of my most favorite open worlds in a game ever. And I'm like, since I played so many open world games since that original release, will I appreciate it less because I feel so fatigued and weary about like whenever I play a new open world game these days. I'm like, oh man, it's another big open world to explore with another towers to unlock and whatever, and here we go. So I was playing this game. I was like, no, this game still has that magic for me. I still love exploring this world and going out and installing those data probes and uncovering the map hexagon by hexagon. And I was trying to think of like why this game still works for me when I still feel so fatigued by other modern open world games. And it's like a combination of little things that like really build up on top of themselves to make this feel so pleasant to play. Like I think one of the standout ones, for example, is like the strength of the soundtrack and how your party members don't really speak at all outside of combat. Like outside of combat, they speak because that's actually part of the game mechanic of with the soul voices. But outside of that, when you're just trying to like find your way around, they don't speak at all. You can like soak in the music and the atmosphere and like all the creatures uh on the screen, and like seeing like that, like the wildlife kind of make it believable that like you're like exploring this planet and like having a believable sense of place and time in it. And it also helps that like pathing around this world involves a lot of like looking at like enemy icons and saying what type of aggro do they have. If they have
it's dangerous.
a certain type, if they have a certain
places.
type of icon, they'll aggro on sight. If they have a certain type of icon, they might aggro on sound. Sometimes they'll have both. But what it does, it's like it's not like every single enemy has that. It's not like it doesn't feel like it's another like these pack of enemies. They'll aggro me on sight whenever like I get near them. It's like no, even the same type of mob like might be pacified. Like they won't aggro on you, while another same type of mob might have like these aggro markers on them. So it's like you're actively thinking about like some of these creatures are friendly, so I can get to this. Even though this, let's say this data probe installation is like surrounded by like level 42 like spider-esque monsters, I can just go up to them and install that data probe because they don't have the aggro markers on them, so I know that it's safe there. So it's like this mixture of like running around with you don't have to worry about stamina, you have a great jump height, you have
No
infinite
fall
stamina
damage.
to run around it, no fall damage. So you're thinking about just like different routes of like how do I get to this safely in a way that like I won't get into a fight at all, and that keeps the momentum of exploration engaging because you feel like even though like you absolutely cannot like always go everywhere in the world right away until like you get like the flight unit on your scale, you have that believability because it has jump height, because of like finding safe ways around mobs. That's like I can go to almost any place I think I can on foot, if I try hard enough. Even if you can't, you'll think of like alternative like different routes on that map. Like okay, maybe I can go around here and there's like a more direct path to like that side quest marker all the way out there, you know. And it's so good about building on top of those things along with just the gorgeous, you know, like visual aesthetic of the world. Like different biomes have like vastly different color palettes that all pop out at you and have different ways of looking at different times of day and different weather patterns. And it's like
And of course, different soundtracks.
yeah, exactly.
Yep.
And this world, I'm like this game still has that magic. I was worried about like the luster of the open world in Xenoblade X having fallen off. It's like no, not at all. It's still a blast to explore and ever since the original release.
I think that's actually what I like so much about this remaster, and ultimately kind of like I gave it a 10 out of 10, and that's kind of why, is because it streamlines a lot of the like mechanical navigation and ways that you use your map and stuff, but it integrally does not change that experience of the open world. So like the follow ball feature works a lot more intuitively now, taking you to your objectives. But you still have to get around that like level 80 monkey in a canyon or something, you know? So like the map is much easier to use. The Frontier nav system is a little more intuitive. Follow ball works a lot better, but that core experience of how you explore this world and how you make your way around this world is still the same. So I think it kind of like the way I say it is it sands off some of the rough edges, but just doesn't change that core feeling.
Yeah, I think the one of the most like 50-50 things. I mean, in general, I'm more positive than negative on it, but like I think the one thing that kind of feels like they kind of gave too much power to the players is this quick cooldown system, where it's a new feature where early on they give you like this whole feature of like whenever you use a skill that's on cooldown, if you have like this bar, still borrow this quick down cooldown or quick down whatever meter quick cooldown. You can like press that on the skill on cooldown, it'll immediately do it again, even though you can't, even though it's still on cooldown. So like Adam and I were talking about this previously when he was going through it, and like a little bit when we talked about it on the podcast for the preview. But like it's one of those additions. It's like I don't mind it since I'm replaying it, so I'm like I'm okay if like the battles are generally more swifter, but it does change the power dynamic in a way that is not reflected in the original. For example, there are some early side quests that like, oh, there's like a massive clump of like level 25 mobs and I'm only level 10 or a level 13 or whatever, where it's like, okay, but I already have like a working build of like if I just spam this melee skill enough, they'll die before I die. So I feel more confident in taking down these higher level mobs, where in a way in the original release that would be virtually impossible because you're forced to have these more um, battles of endurance in the original because you didn't have this quick cooldown feature. So I think that's like the so far the one aspect of the game that's like drastically different in the terms of like they just kind of give you the tools to kind of break this game open really fast. way before you even get like the overdrive feature in this game, which
Yeah.
you know it's like I said, I'm 50-50 on it. I'm more positive than negative on like because I'm okay with like kind of making things go by a little bit faster when it comes to combat encounters, but it is one of those things that's like I don't know what they were kind of thinking.
Yeah, the original game, and this is true for like any game that has such a high level of flexibility. There's a lot that you can do in like character building in this game in terms of like your equipment and your skills and there's both active skills and passive skills and different weapon types and things like that. There's a lot you can do with your armors and like the different like enhancement augments that you put on it. It's already a pretty darn flexible game, and if you're the type of person who likes to like theory craft and min-max, you can, in the original game, and this is true for any game with this level of flexibility, you can kind of easily break the game open and become overpowered. And I feel like that's part of the charm, is to like see how strong you can become. But the quick cooldown system does like just make it even easier. And I mentioned this in our preview podcast where, I was level 35 and I would see level 50 enemies. And in the original version, there's no way I could beat them because I couldn't beat them fast enough before they killed me. But now with quick cooldown, it's a little bit more tilted in your favor, where it's like as long as you can spam these skills quick enough, you can do it, or you're more likely to. And the way that it works is you can gain a lot more EXP more quickly that way. You can build up those overdrive bonuses quicker, and it tilted even more in your favor. And like you, I was a little bit mixed on it because it's just like, especially when you compare it to like the Skell battles, because it takes the Skells don't get the quick cooldown, at least not nearly as quickly, not as early in the game. So it's a little bit. I'm with you. I'm a little bit mixed on that. I wouldn't say it's like a big detractor, but it's definitely something that changes the complexion of the game. So it's hard to like ignore it, but like I don't hate it. I don't like it. It's just like, oh, this is definitely different. And it's definitely something that if you play the original version and you play this version, it is noticeable. So
and we talked about this also, but like it's like kind of weird that they gave it that to like on foot, but still nothing for Skells. Skells are
you can get it for Skells. It takes a long time.
Okay, so they do
eventually.
Get it. Okay. Huh,
I see the concept for it because the other Xenoblade games have more interactable elements during battles. I mean, you have the soul voices in Xenoblade X, but in the other Xenoblade games 2 and 3, you're kind of constantly doing something, whether it's using a skill or doing a chain or whatever it might be. Xenoblade X, by comparison, has a lot more like waiting between cooldowns. So I see the concept of why they put it in to make those battles feel similarly like engaging, that you're always doing something.
Yeah. But I guess the one of the big things, obviously we can't go too much into the detail about it, but one of the big things that with this definitive edition is they added new story content to it after the original ending of Xenoblade X, and because a lot of the one of the big flaws in that game is like it kind of ended on a big cliffhanger, and people were like, "Are we ever gonna get a follow up, a sequel?" And then now we have the definitive edition that does continue the story after the end. Obviously, we can't go too much into like the spoilers.
Yeah, we don't want to spoil people who haven't beaten it yet.
Yeah, but Nintendo has teased it in some of their trailers of like, hey, there is this new land mass that you'll be able to explore. So I kind of got some general impressions, from both of you, if you've been able to experience it.
So yeah, so there is a new kind of epilogue to the game. It takes place after the original ending. This shouldn't be a surprise if you played the original game and if you watch the trailer. It's kind of obvious that that's where it takes place. We won't spoil anything. It's not like Future Connected or Future Redeemed, where it's like a separate like menu or a separate like game mode or anything like that. It's kind of tacked on to the ending. By the way, the original level cap in Xenoblade Cross was 60. Now the level cap is 99. Partially to incorporate this, but also that affects other game balance things, right? But anyways, so yeah, once you get to the original ending of the game, I will say that the original ending to the game is all intact. It's all there, the same as it was before. I was wondering when I was playing through this, like, is the ending like adjusted any to fit in new content or anything like that? Is it do the events take place slightly differently? And the answer is no. The original ending is practically exactly the same as it was before, with the cliffhanger that you mentioned. But then just after you get that first set of credits, it kind of continues on with an epilogue story. It's about, I think I beat it in about 8 hours, just to kind of give you a rough idea of length. It features a new character and it features a new kind of threat, and it does build upon that ending. It does answer some of those lingering questions. I won't say anything more than that. And let's see, how do I want to say this? You eventually do get to go to this new landmass. It's not right away. There's first a couple of events on Mira, just as part of the new story events and the new quests and the new character and whatnot. But eventually you do go to the new mass, the new land area that they talked about, or that they showed in the trailers. It's separate from Mira, and the structure is a little bit different. I think, what's the best way to describe this?
A little hard, yeah.
It's kind of like a little mini map that you get to explore, and there are new enemies. There are new unique enemies, the tyrants. It kind of ties into the new story, of course. There are a few new soundtrack options. Not a lot, but a few new. Like, if you wanted more Sawano soundtrack, there is a little bit.
I guess it's kind of comparable to Future Connected in Xenoblade 1 Definitive Edition.
Yeah, I think it's more like that.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's quite as big as that, but
no,
similar.
Interesting.
You get a little bit more backstory on... So, at the end of Xenoblade 1... at the end of Xenoblade Cross, the original version, you get a little bit of Elma's backstory right at the end. And this epilogue does go a little bit deeper into that, that shouldn't be too surprising, considering the state of things at that point in the game. And then, ties the new character into that. I won't say anything more than this, but actually one of my favorite scenes in the new content is a dialogue scene between Lyn, who's one of the main characters of the game, and the new character that's introduced in this epilogue. And it's not like a big story moment. It's not like a big epic reveal or anything like that. It's not a big twist. It's just kind of like a nice little dialogue that's it's very Tetsuya Takahashi feel to it. I think Hayes might know what I'm talking about.
I do, yeah.
Yeah, there's just like a little small section, a little small dialogue there that I think it feels very Xeno. Xenosaga, Xenoblade, Xenogears. And I guess what? Do you have any like Josh or whoever, is there anything you have like a question that you want answered that wouldn't be a spoiler?
I guess like how this is going to be a hard question to answer. How big, I guess, is the new area?
It's not as big.
Honestly, is the best way to Go ahead.
It's not as big as any of the individual like there's the 5 main continents in on Mira. It's not as big as any of those. It's probably not even half as big as any of those.
But okay, but I know like in terms of like what the trailers have very much like teased just a few seconds of, like it seems like some part of this new landmass is like floating islands.
Yes.
Does it instill you with the same feeling as you did when you first like explored Mira for the first time? Like everything felt new and like there's a sense of wonder in the exploration, or is it more focused or more typical? This is a weird question.
Not really. It's a little different the way you approach it. It's okay. You are like searching around this new land area, and I don't want to say what you're searching for.
Yeah.
But you are like searching around like the different caves and the different areas of this land area to try to progress the story and things like that there. But it's a little bit of a different approach than, like you're on an alien planet. Let's just go try to survive that Mira has.
And since it's like floating islands, are you more reliant on scales in general when you're going through this? new area.
I guess I'll give a very, very minor spoiler. When you first get there, you do not have your skull, and then you get it
Okay.
shortly later.
Okay. Interesting.
The other thing I think, and again, being as vague as possible, but I think Xenoblade theory crafters will have some new things to talk about with this.
Okay.
Because, people have, for a decade, debated over Xenoblade Cross being connected to the rest of the series. So, again, I really can't say more than that, but there will be some new things to talk about in that regard.
And I do wonder if if they're gonna issue like a new art book for Xenoblade X Definitive Edition, like that'll reflect like the new editions, because like the Xenoblade X The World of Mira art book was like it provided a lot of that side material that you were talking about, like some of the new character editions, like they were first seen in that art book, like kind of like as like concepts or things that they had to cut, for the final thing. So I do wonder if they'll have like a new version of the Xenoblade X book that will talk more about what they added to the definitive edition, and maybe even show off more things that like, oh, we wanted to include this but had to cut it.
I think this is that file of Mira or something, right? That's the book.
Yeah, the File of Mirror, the World of Mirror, something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, because I was actually looking for that book. I have it in one of these IKEA boxes at home because I wanted to get it out and my limited edition for the game to take a photo of them, but I couldn't find it. I still haven't opened it because when I bought it, I hadn't played the Wii U game, and I am about 10 hours into the Switch game. And this is something which everyone who
And
played the
also
Wii
so
U
different
version.
from
Sorry, go ahead.
the fact like in the original game, this is a little bit saying it kind of plainly, but like the side quests are very much just filler, and I know filler is kind of a loaded term, but
You mean in Xenoblade 1?
Yes, sorry, I was trying to say the original game, as in the original Xenoblade game, not the original version of Cross. Yeah, I'll try to be more careful with my language. In Xenoblade Chronicles 1, the side quests are not really there for a narrative vehicle. There's a few later in the game that sort of get there, but they're really more just gameplay opportunity for you to mess around, just to go have fun.
I think literally in Xenoblade 1, there are quests that are like Battle Hunt 1, Battle Hunt 2, Battle Hunt 3, or something like that. Like it's literally like checklist.
So putting yourself into the into the mindset of, okay, I'm playing Xenoblade Chronicles Cross, the original version of Cross on the Wii U, and then having to like recalibrate your brain and be like, oh, like there is I don't I've not played this game, so I'm kind of gleaning from the way you've described it, but there is key narrative in those side quests that maybe don't push the main thrust of the story forward, but give you the character moments, the world building, the racial interactions and things like that, compared to Battle Quest 1 from Xenoblade Chronicles 1. So that obviously now that we can go, Xenoblade Chronicles 2 and 3 have kind of found a good middle ground where you have the blade quests in 2. And in 3 you have, I forget what that seventh party member is called, but those hero quests for your guest characters and like how they interact with the different colonies and with the world story. So now going back to Cross, our mindset's just completely different, which people who have played both versions of the game can compare and contrast. People who have only played the original Xenoblade Chronicles Cross or the remaster uh, just are coming at it from different perspectives. So it might explain like why people take to this game so differently, or why opinions on it can be so varied.
There are
I
some
think
go for it, Hayes.
I think I agree, and I think it's also kind of important to say with the side quest that like all of the main quests in Xenoblade Cross are kind of gated to world progression. So you have to like get a certain survey rate or sometimes complete certain side quests. So it's just kind of like the whole way the game plays out is kind of built around that idea of side questing.
Yeah. I guess one of the final things I'll say is like it's always like weird like how Monolith Soft like just like there's like always some weird small things that like Monolith Soft does for its games that's just like it's like one of those things that kind of make you tilt your head. Like in this one right away, it's like there's no way to see the first cutscene in the game in any other language but English if you have a Western copy of the game or booting it up from like a Western account, but you want to play with Japanese voices. Because you have to first get through that opening cutscene, then you can change the voices once you made your character, and then like you get control for the first time, and then it'll let you like reselect a voice language. So like you can technically just like, if you want to change voices, you select from one audio language to another, then go back, and then you can reselect your voice and whatever. But since it has to be facilitated after the first cutscene, after you made your character, you have to like, I think, set your switch region to
As they say, your
Japan.
system region or
Yeah, to
system
like if
language.
you want to see the first cutscene like in Japanese voices, for example, which is like, it's so weird that you have to do that if you want to see that cutscene in Japanese.
I'm sure someone who positions it artistically enough could change my mind, but that's a pet peeve of mine. Like I want to go to a start menu. Maybe I'm a fossil, and then press like new game or start game. Like when you boot up something and it's like, oh, we realize this is your first time booting it up. We're gonna immediately kick you into a cutscene. I'm like,
That's the
no, don't
thing.
do
It
that.
does
That's like
boot you. It does boot you into a main menu cutscene before you start it, but you can't switch audio language at that first boot up, even at the first like time you visit that main menu to start the new game. So it's like they even had that step already there, but they just arbitrarily won't let you switch audio language from there.
Did the
So
Wii
it's
U
like,
version have Japanese voices?
I don't think so. I don't know if the
Okay.
I
I
don't
don't think it did.
yeah, I don't think it did. I
No,
remember
not on Wii U. Yeah.
what I remember from the Wii U is like, if you wanted to like the game to have a lot faster loading, you need to like go to the Wii U eShop and had to like download all these data packs for the game.
Yeah,
Um,
you had to put it on a flash drive and plug
Yep,
it into the Wii U.
I still have my flash drive literally plugged into my Wii U right now.
I
re-
do
re-
too, actually.
remember when they had like the Xenoblade X limited edition on Wii U that had like the cursed flash drive because it had a weird
I
like
have that. I have that.
yeah.
Yeah.
It had
It
like a
was
weird
supposed to
like
have like I think 5 songs or something from the soundtrack.
yeah,
I haven't plugged that into anything though.
and then like the letter designation for it was like, I think X, and that like fucked up a lot of like, for some people's setups, like a lot of things, because it was like designated as X from the get go. So that was a fun time.
I
And
should try
also
that and see what happens now, because I'm gonna look for it. But yeah, one question I did have, because I didn't get very far on the Wii U, is so I played 10 hours and I'm wondering how long till I get my scale. So I decided to look up a guide, and apparently I need to play a long time
It's about 30, 40 hours.
and even longer to fly, right?
Yes.
yes,
Yeah.
Yeah. So
CD, who occasionally contributes to RPG site, he writes for Nintendo
Alex Seedhouse.
Insider. Alex Seedhouse, he goes by CD. He got his skull, and he was like, "Finally, I got my skull." He jumps, and then he like falls into the water underneath New LA. And he's like, "Oh, I thought I could fly, but I can't fly."
yeah, because it plays the song called "Don't Worry" from the soundtrack. You know, I've probably heard the soundtrack more than most other games that I've played. So hearing it in game for the first time is funny, because that's what I'm doing for the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah, flight's probably not until like 50
Yeah.
hours
Yep.
into that game at the earliest. Yeah.
There is a new skull that has like the cockpit mode and like the more like
I was gonna bring
like,
that up. So maybe this is new material, kind of. But I did like in Cullen's review, he's like, one of these skulls has cruise mode. It turns you into a plane. I didn't find this useful at all. It was very blunt.
it's just
or
one
something.
skull of many that's like has this extra mode. And the thing is, skulls are sort of expensive, so it's like if you want to see it, you have to like pony up for it. So, I mean, I did get that skull and I put it in my party because you eventually want to have like, generally speaking, for like end game stuff, you eventually want like you want 4 skulls, one for each of your active party members. And like I made one of them the new skull that has like the cockpit mode, the like the jet mode or whatever it's called. It's just a new skull of many that were already in the game. It's like minorly cool.
I was just gonna say, if you really want, you can buy a skull for every single party member.
Yes, you
Buy, like,
can.
22 skulls.
You want at least 4 eventually.
I'm trying to remember if like how the Wii U handled this, if the level of detail, because like in the when I'm playing through the Switch definitive edition, especially if you're going through like New LA, like there's a constant issue of like things look empty until like you get
Oh,
like
they
up
pop
close to it,
in.
and
Yeah.
then they start popping in. And I'm like thinking, was like, was it this egregious on the Wii U
It
version also?
was.
But I can't remember.
It
Okay,
was.
okay, yeah.
I mean, I'm going from my memory here, but I'm positive that the Wii U also had this version where things just loaded in sometimes slower than other things, and you just have to sit there a bit. That was in the original game. That's in the definitive edition. It's just kind of like it is what it is. It's a
Switch
part of
2
the game.
will save it with this like hidden, inaccessible
60
60
FPS
FPS
mode.
just option executable that people found. And
Oh, have you all been playing it more docked or handheld?
I played it
docked.
docked.
Okay,
I'm
because
about 50-50.
Because when I played it handheld, it feels really good. It's definitely the crispest Xenoblade has looked on Switch, like by far. But when I play it docked, there's a lot of input lag. Are you noticing any of that? Because it feels a little sluggish. Or is it just me?
I notice it. Like I'm playing with a Switch Pro controller, and I definitely feel the
Yeah.
input lag. But it's not the type of game that's like you need to be super reactive to stuff. But I can definitely feel it. It's
Yeah.
one of those things like it doesn't really bug me because of the type of game it is. But also like I you know I wish it could be better, but it's something I've learned to live with as well. But I get it.
I'm interested to see how it will run on Switch 2. Presumably that will be an
Yeah.
improvement.
It's just it's cool that it's like back and people seem to be loving it, and seems to the additions for the most part like have helped it more than like and doesn't really strip the identity of it. It's kind of just weird to see like a lot more people are having more appreciation for this game now, and obviously a lot of the new quality of life stuff helps a lot for that game. But I'm just for me, I was just like as a person who like reviewed the original version of that game, and like definitely you know understood its flaws, but also appreciated it for what it's doing. It's kind of like one of those. It's like it's cool that more people finally get to play this game and talk about it and get to learn about like these characters. And once again, we always say it like every time we bring it up, but just in case don't skip out on the side quests in this game. Definitely try to do as many of them as you can. It's worth it. That's the heart of the game.
Yeah, I think for like final thoughts, anyone who listens to this podcast, and I think people broadly have kind of understood this idea, is that going into this game, you kind of do have to just understand that it is a little bit of a different flavor of Xenoblade. It obviously has a lot of the same core like tenets that we expect from Xenoblade, but it is, by title and by nature, just its own thing. And so like, I've already seen some people coming into the game for the first time absolutely loving it. Especially usually it's because of the world, right? And I've already seen a few people say like, I don't know if this is for me, and that's totally valid. And it's just kind of its own thing. I love it. I know Hayes loves it. James, who is not on this podcast, loves it. It's it's a really cool game, I think. And I'm glad they gave it a second chance rather than having it languish on Wii U forever. So
Now,
Yeah.
my final question is obviously one of my like spring games is to play this because it's my one lingering kind of gap for all of Monolith Soft. Um, that and finishing the original Baten Kaitos eventually. But the like, what do we think is next? Like, I'm trying to remember. Wasn't there like next for the studio? I mean, because obviously as soon as they remastered the first game, got the third game out with its own epilogue, and then got cross remastered. I'm trying to like clear the cobwebs out of my brain. Wasn't there like some concept art that they were working on, like some project, but it's been kind of
It
down
was,
low ever since?
it was like more like a medieval fantasy esque like concept art.
they had like a hiring thing where they were hiring for more fantasy based, like medieval. They had like one concept art. I'm actually on their website right now, see if I can find it. We don't know anything about it really, but it's just kind of like maybe it's not Xeno, maybe it's something else. And obviously, Monolith Soft works on a bunch of other like Nintendo stuff too. But
Yeah.
Legend of
Yeah,
Zelda, basically.
About a month ago, they also hired the cutscene director from Square Enix that worked on 7 Remake, Kingdom Hearts 3, and Final Fantasy 16. So
Oh yeah, that's right.
could be part of that too.
I I say this every time. I'm like, I hope Monolith Soft works on a thing that's not Xeno related.
Yeah.
I always like when people get to
I mean,
branch out and do experimental
IPs are
stuff.
cool, but new things are cooler, I
Yeah.
suppose.
Yeah.
You don't
Although
want
I will
that
say,
Xeno Saga? What?
Yeah.
I also would
Go for it,
go ahead.
Hayes. No, go
I
ahead.
wouldn't mind a Xenoblade Warriors too. I'll say that.
Okay, now we're cooking, but it has to be on Switch too, because I don't want to see that thing running on a base Switch compared to some of these other Warrior games that
Like
we've
Age
seen
of
people.
Calamity.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That would be a funny thing to see. That'd be
Who do you
interesting.
think is going to buy a Switch 2, which we'll learn more about in like less than 2 weeks?
I'm gonna buy
And the
it.
first
Even
game
if
they'll
they tell me
play
there's
on it is Age of Calamity to see if it runs
I'll,
better.
at least,
That's me for sure.
at least 1,000 people. Definitely at least 1,000 people.
they could sell me a completely broken ass product, I'll still buy it. I mean, it can run Switch 1 games. You're already being paid off.
Hmm. Yeah, I don't know. Monolith Soft. I hope they show something at that Switch 2 presentation. It's
Yeah, that would be neat.
let's see what they're working on next. Obviously, this isn't the only thing they were. There's other projects internally that they've been cooking up. Um, yeah, I just hope it's something completely new. But if it's another Xeno game, I'll be there day one as well. So,
Yeah. They do a lot of co-development too, so I wouldn't be
yeah.
surprised if they're helping on a big game for Switch 2 that's not one of their IPs,
Mm.
Absolutely. Yeah, people are talking about they updated their portfolio and like talking about man, when you look at the Monolith Soft portfolio page, it's like truly one of the most like established high profile chronology, I guess, of games that you've developed and co-developed and did development assistance on, and it's just it's hard to beat Monolith Soft in terms of they release beloved games, whether it's from them directly or they helped out on it. What I really want from them is a new Project Cross Zone. How about that? Or re-release the
I
previous
agree.
Project Cross Zones. Because those games have some of the best localization work I've seen in games. The people who brought those over, it's like you need to have a certain mastery of the video game industry to understand and get and parse through all the interactions in those games. They're lovely.
My favorite one is the Sagaton Shiro.
Yeah, the Sagata Sunshiro one with the Sakura from Sakura Wars.
And they actually got the commercial reference.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Well, now we've had a couple of our episodes of this podcast talking about Xenoblade Chronicles Cross. Obviously, we had the preview episode a few weeks ago. We've had this extended talk today. We obviously have the review from Cullen up on the site, rpgsite.net. And then we have Hayes' review over at inverse.com. And we have a few guides for Xenoblade Chronicles Cross up on the site already, and maybe a few more to come. We'll see how that's looking. So we'll have all that covered up on the site at rpgsite.net. The other major RPG release for this week, kind of going completely in the other direction, as I teed up at the very beginning of this podcast, is finally the actual release of Assassin's Creed Shadows. A lot of talk going into this release about Ubisoft, about the series, about the game in particular. One of the few times that we've exercised our right to write a review in progress over from Josh Tolentino, who has started the game but has found out that it is quite big. So I know that Josh has been playing this. I'm not sure if anyone else has picked this up as it's released. I do know that Adam has some of the more recent history with the RPG side of the Assassin's Creed series, but has kind of explicitly stated that you weren't immediately interested in Shadows. But we'll go ahead and give the microphone over to Josh, which we kind of call Josh 2, just so you know, if you haven't listened to this podcast before, delineate between Josh Torres and Josh Tolentino. So Josh, if you're still with us, hello.
Hello. Yeah,
Welcome,
I've been
welcome
playing
back.
Assassin's Creed Shadows. Yeah, good to be back. And it is like other um technically, I mean, I just found this out because I had to look up when it was supposed to be released. when the other games were released, but this is the first game of what Ubisoft calls the third period of Assassin's Creed. So technically, Shadows is the this is something I misspoke about in our review in progress, but I mentioned that it's like the fifth game of this RPG era of Assassin's Creed, but apparently, according to Ubisoft's own classification, I guess, it's the first game of the third era. So, either way, it's I would say it's part of that lineage. I like that was started with Assassin's Creed Origins and continued into Odyssey and
Valhalla.
Valhalla. Yes, that's right, the Viking one. And I think it's pretty good. It's really big, which is why we went with the review in progress, and we only got our review code a few days. The PC review code we received came out a little close to release date, so there really wasn't enough time to get a good enough look at it in the time available. So we went with the review in progress for that one. The full review is hopefully soon, and but I think despite me not kind of bouncing off a lot of these a lot of Assassin's Creed from this era, because like as I mentioned the last time, I mean the last game I played, the last Assassin's Creed game I played to completion was Syndicate. So that was maybe almost a decade ago at this point, and that was the last game of period one of what they call it. I mean the
So you just
before.
skipped period 2. You
I
just picked
wouldn't
up.
say I skipped it. I spent some time. I spent about
Oh, okay.
maybe 20 hours with Origins, 10 with Odyssey, and a few with Valhalla. So, but each and every time, it was like the map would open up, and then I'd be, oh, this is so much bigger than everything than I thought it would be, and I will put it in the backlog because I've got stuff to do,
Yeah,
and it
me
never
and
got
Adam
done.
both like played Valhalla, and and Adam, I don't know if he 100%ed or got very close to 100%ing Valhalla. He's like he sounded like it drained years of his life. He sounded rugged. He sounded like he's seen a lot after it. He's like, oh, I don't know if I can do it anymore. uh,
This just reminded me of when I was reviewing Assassin's Creed Odyssey many years ago, and I think Ubisoft used to still give very not early access, like with Atlas and Capcom. I think we've gotten used to like 3 to 5 weeks sometimes, but with Assassin's Creed Odyssey, I think they sent me the code 7 or 8 days before the embargo,
oh, hell no,
and
fuck that.
yeah, and I spent the whole weekend on what I hadn't watched much of the trailer, so I spent the whole weekend on what I was playing. And after I think on Sunday night, I saw Ubisoft presents Assassin's Creed Odyssey, and that was like the prologue island. And I said, I am screwed. There is no way I'm finishing this in time. And I did it a bit late. I think it was for print at that time or something. But yeah, that after that, I knew I'm never going to hit an embargo for a full review on this. And I think I got Assassin's Creed Shadows maybe a day or two before Josh 2. I was playing it on PS5 and I just played like 10 hours. We'll discuss it then. But yeah, this I do not know how I would have been able to cover this if I had to hit an embargo. I'd probably just be like 70 or 80 hours you need for this kind of thing. So no way. That's
Yeah,
all I have to say.
now that Adam's back, but Adam, I was describing like how you described your time at Valhalla, like you either 100%ed or nearly 100%ed it, and you and I both like played it. I didn't beat it because I felt the fatigue. Like 40 hours in, I'm like I can't do this anymore, and you're like you sounded like you've like went through like a tremendous like exhausting experience after. You're like, oh man.
I'm still a little bit burned out. I mean, partially my fault, of course, but even then, like the way that Assassin's Creed Valhalla is set up, and let me know if I don't know if Shadows is set up the same way or not. But Valhalla, you go to like England, and you have like 10 different regions of the map, and they each have their own little story. I don't think you need to do all of them, but you basically like go to a region and then you follow, like 3 or 4 quests in that region to do like the story of that region. And then once that's done, you kind of check it off the map and you go to the next one. And then like there's like 10 of these or so, roughly 10 to 12, 8 to 12. So they're kind of like separated stories. And I think the unfortunate part with Valhalla is that they were kind of all samey, and they all kind of like went through the same general like progression in terms of how the stories worked, and like they always ended in a raid and kind of had like the same kind of skeleton to them, and it kind of just felt big and repetitive. Does Shadows do anything at all that's like, is it like these separated regions with the separated stories like Valhalla was? I hope I'm making sense.
Actually, in that sense, the way you describe it, because I did not actually spend enough time with Valhalla to really get into that, to get a feel for that structure. And I'm not quite done with Shadows yet, but the skeleton of it seems to be as you describe, in that each region has kind of its own. There's kind of an overarching, kind of like, as far as I'm aware, learning from osmosis about Valhalla, and by extension about Origins and Odyssey. It has the same structure where you've got this organization of baddies, that is part of this. That's fictional. Where in Shadows there is I guess this shouldn't be surprising to someone who's played a lot of Assassin's Creed, but right behind all of these historical events there is a secret cabal of bad dudes who are trying to do things that usually involve ancient artifacts and stuff. That's like the fictional side, right? I mean, it's always been
I think
about.
that's our podcast title: A Secret Cabal of Bad Dudes.
Yes, the secret cabal of bad dudes. I don't have the game loaded up, but
No,
and
it's
I don't
fine.
know if it's really considered a spoiler to name them, but anyway, secret cabal of bad dudes to kill, and that's sort of how. I mean, to answer your question, Adam, yeah, it's like each region sort of has its, after, especially after the kind of the tutorial island, the tutorial province. The oh, sorry, the game, the whole map is, it's not like the whole of Japan. It's not like a Odyssey where it looked like you had all of Greece in this sort of small open world style arrangement. Instead, it's a slice of Japan of what you might call part of Kansai. So that would be, um, it uses the old province names. So there's Iga, there's Yamato, there's Yamashiro province, there's Harima and stuff like that. But anyway, these would be the Kyoto Osaka metro in modern day, plus a bit down of the Kii Peninsula in the south, and up to kind of like the northern beach areas. And that's kind of a slice of west central Japan that contains Kyoto, Osaka, um, and like the seat of power for the Nobunaga I mean, for Oda Nobunaga's territory, in and that's kind of where the placement is, because and so the tutorial region is a kind of in the southwestern area, right after the prologue. And each of these regions, as you've unlocked more, each of them has their own story that's kind of involved with this secret cabal. And but it's also got a more historically inspired bit where you've got, oh, here's this figure from history, and then this cabal member is interacting with them, or they're undermining them in some way, and you kind of move through it. And then like in the modern, this period of Assassin's Creed, this RPG period, they even have level requirements. Like the opening province of Izumisetsu is like level requirement 6, and then by the end it gets up to 35 or so, or yeah, a little under 40, I think. So I'm not quite there yet, but as you unlock these provinces, they kind of have a sort of episodic vibe where they aren't really that connected, but they do. I mean, they make references, so it does a better. I would say it does a decent job of keeping it feeling like a larger story, but there's definitely, like, you could call it an arc, and and it makes it feel like you're on a campaign of sorts where time is passing and you're running a a big organization that's resisting this cabal and also resisting like Nobunaga's conquest of Nobunaga's advancing conquest of Japan and so on.
Yeah.
And
If I could jump
that,
in,
Yeah,
sorry,
go for it.
oh, go
go
ahead.
ahead.
I actually can talk a bit about how it kind of compares to Valhalla. I completed Valhalla, regrettably. I wish I hadn't.
Thank you for your
um,
service.
yeah, but Shadows kind of adopts like kind of a middle ground between Valhalla and the last game, Mirage. So in Valhalla, you're kind of you have a map and you're going to each region and you're kind of completing the story there and moving on to the next one. It almost feels like a bunch of seasons of a TV show. But in Shadows, the structure takes from Mirage, where your objectives are to assassinate, like Josh said, this cabal of people. And so even like your objective map is just a bunch of icons of people you need to assassinate. Um, so instead of kind of playing through the map, you're instead selecting who you're assassinating next or who you're investigating next. And you're going through this hierarchy of people. So that's kind of like the core difference between those.
Okay, yeah, I was wondering like how they would uh evolve the formula from Mirage because that was the most recent one. I don't know if it was like completely separate from that format or not. It's good to have that insight on that end. I've heard like I guess this is pretty interesting. And what kind of surprised me about this game is like even though they have this dual protagonist, it takes some time to get Yasuke because I know you play through like the first 8 to 10 hours as Naue, and then after that it's like
Yeah.
okay, then you can play as Yasuke. I thought they would be available both pretty early on. Kind of, I want to hear some thoughts about that.
Yeah, so I've relatively recently, I just unlocked the bits where you get free access, where the world really opens up, and you can choose between both protagonists at more or less at will, and I think it's an interesting step. I'm not sure works 100%, but the framing of the dual protagonists is interesting because like if you paid attention to the marketing, you'd think that this game is split between them equally, and it's two dual protagonists, and in a way, I mean, like you can play once the world opens up, and once you gain access, you can kind of choose who you're hanging out with most of the time. I mean, you're playing with most of the time, but at least early on, it feels like a. And here's where I kind of go back to the last Assassin's Creed I had a lot of familiarity with, um, which is Syndicate. It feels like a Jacob and Evie sort of situation where you can kind of choose which one is which, but it sort of feels like the story is more like it's about Jacob and
Hmm.
doesn't hundred I mean they where the writing makes allowances to feel like it's about both characters and it gives them moments and it gives them sort of an arc each, and it's much more substantial than in the way Syndicate handled it. I have to point out, but it kind of feels like Naoe is the main character. I mean, she gets the most involvement. And she's the one, without going. I don't know if it's really appropriate to spoil, but she's the one that's connected to the assassins most directly. At least so far. Like I said, I'm not all the way done, so things could change. Um, but yeah, it sort of feels like she was the main character. Not to say that Yasuke is like an afterthought, but his story, his personal journey, and his involvement in the game and the events here is a little bit more. It's a bit more personal. It's not as directly connected to the whole plot. It's like there's more focus on because I mean maybe they were trying to be a bit more light touch on it, because one thing I've seen about this era of Assassin's Creed is that they are a little less willing to mess around with people who actually existed. In the earlier Assassin's Creeds, you could hang out with Queen Victoria and you could assassinate the Pope.
You could
A
hug
Pope who actually
Leonardo da
existed.
Vinci.
Yeah, Leonardo da Vinci was your cue. I mean, there's still that sort of involvement. You early on in the game, you get tea lessons from Sen Norikyu, who was one of Nobunaga's tea masters and one of the more influential people in Japanese aesthetic history. But like, it doesn't feel sort of like. I mean, then you and in the prologue, in fact, where you start as an Iga ninja, and then for those who aren't like watching their pop documentaries, Iga was the guerrilla resistance of the people of Iga against the conquest of Nobunaga and other warlords. Kind of put a lot of fuel into the popular image of the ninja, or the popular image of the shinobi. And you are an Iga. Naoe is an Iga who is somehow connected to the assassin brotherhood in some way or in some peripheral way, and her people's resistance against Nobunaga is yeah, I mean, like, helps inform all of that history. So I mean, it's not like they don't do any historical stuff. It's just that like the later era, they've been a bit more light touch with actual historical figures, and I think that might be an influence on how they treated Yasuke during this.
I,
I mean, it's definitely like a speculative role because we don't 100% know about what the actual historical figure of Yasuke did in the records. So they kind of speculate that he might have been one of Nobunaga's like close samurai or a warrior under his command.
yeah, and
Um,
they're totally fine to, like, explore that space too.
yeah,
It's like you don't have to be like
yeah,
totally
yeah.
bound by it. They're more than willing to bend the rules on history. And Assassin's Creed was and never was like like bound by historical accuracy of like
That's
what it
true.
wanted to do. You know, I
Yeah,
think
I'd,
but so
I'd
like,
ag-
oh,
So in Valhalla, one of the this is more mechanical, but in Valhalla, playing through that, I kind of felt like I was so in Valhalla you play as a Viking, right? And
mhm.
I felt like I was just mowing through like almost an endless number of just stupid bandit mooks or whatever, like over and over and over again, just mowing them
yeah.
down over and over, and it kind of got a little tiring. Like I guess like how much combat are you doing in Assassin's Creed Shadows? I'm kind of guessing that like Yasuke might do more, or like
Yeah,
is he's
yeah,
more of a bruiser
maybe Hayes
type?
could maybe Hayes could speak to this because he played both as well, so
yeah,
he can provide direct comparisons.
yeah, and I've played about 60 hours of Shadows at this point. And yeah, the dual protagonist approach is definitely kind of intentionally to address that, I think, because Naue is much more focused on stealth. She does have combat and she has combat abilities, but she has a lot of stealth abilities and she has better assassination and better sneaking, and Yasuke is much more combat focused. So in pretty much every quest in Shadows, even main story quests, you can choose who you want to play as. So if you want to approach main story quests as assassination attempts like classic AC, you can do that with Naue. Or if you really just want to run in and just fight everyone at one time, you can choose Yasuke because that's very much his focus. He does no stealth. He
You
just
want the
runs in.
Valhalla experience.
Yeah, he just runs in and you use your skills and you fight 15 dudes at once. So it really is, at least in that regard, I think the dual protagonist approach is smart. It's not perfect, obviously, but I think providing options is really good. Uh, the only issue I think is that the further you get into Shadows, you see that there's not a ton of variety between these assassination missions. And even though you have that variety of Naue and Yasuke, essentially you're still just doing the same thing over and over. I mean, there's some variation in terms of, level design, but it really is much like Valhalla or Odyssey or Origins. Eventually, you're kind of doing the same thing multiple times over and over.
It's the Far Cry issue where in the end, like, it's an outpost,
Yeah.
and you can kind of vary that up with level design, but unfortunately, the system's depth isn't quite there to support the size of the map. So before long, you got some like standout locations, like really big places like Osaka Castle. But yeah, like for the smaller places, you do eventually kind of, oh, you've seen this trick before. It's five guys. It's a war. You find two treasure chests or kill one guy in the middle. Stuff like that.
How is there like any like interesting things to do out in the open world in terms of open world activities? Like you and I, Josh, we both played Rise of the Ronin, for example, just like another big open world,
Mhm.
historical Japanese setting. Like, how does it compare to that? How Team Ninja did it in that game? In terms of like what you can do in the open.
I would say that Assassin's Creed, like Shadows, is definitely connected to the previous Assassin's Creed games, and Rise of the Ronin is a contrast to that in that it feels to me connected to Way of the Samurai, which is a much different style of open world game. Um, in the sense of like what interesting things to do in the open world, there are actually for Shadows there are some pretty interesting things. Like you've got, I guess you can build out your hideout. I mean, I guess that's not technically an open world activity, but you've got an expansion of that of the settlement stuff that you see bits of and that I saw bits of in Valhalla, or I mean, not an expansion, kind of an evolution of the settlement thing where you kind of you have a base that you can sort of lay out and upgrade building by building. And out in the open world, there's activities like the you can have sort of, it's not really pets, but you can have wildlife at your hideout. And one of the ways you get the wildlife to show up is when you see animals out in the world in certain situations. I haven't really figured out how you get it consistently, but you can draw scenes of animals using sumie, which is a ink drawings, like ink paintbrush drawings of these things, and you take a picture of a tanuki.
Okay.
I mean, it's basically photography, but
Mhm.
pre-camera. But you take a picture of this tanuki taking eggs in the intro, and in the sort of tutorial section, and then becomes a painting that you can put up inside your base. So you can add that, and then eventually you can sort of get the animals to show up in a way that's related to that. And now you can also do Fujikiri, which is this meditation sort of mini game, I guess, which reminded me of the scanning, the boss summon scanning mini game from Final Fantasy VII Rebirth,
Oh
where
yeah,
you where it gives you a rhythm game and then the prompts slowly disappear and then you just keep up the prompts until the bit is done. And that allows you to meditate and get bonuses, and at the start it allows you to explore memories from Naoe's past, where you see her ninja train from the character's past. So in Naoe's case, it's her ninja training and stuff like that. So that's those are some of the the side activities, and all over the place there's these little animus disruptions that you can basically look at to add a codex entry about the real life location. That is, I kind of missed that sort of stuff, and I didn't see a lot of that in Origins, and it was nice to see that stuff again, um fill out again in Shadows,
How
so that
about you?
you can get your dose of trivia.
How about you, Hayes? Did you find like the open world exploration like rewarding or in general, like was it satisfying to you?
I think so, especially coming off. I think I told Adam this weekend that like I kind of hate Valhalla. I played 160 hours of that game, and I remember being at hour 100 and being like, "Why am I doing this to myself?
I think
I'm
Adam was
really not
asked saying the
enjoying
same
every
thing
minute
too.
of this."
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But I think Shadow's open world feels more satisfying in that regard because there's a lot of little quests that you stumble upon. And so like those will sometimes tie back into main story quests or give you more context on side characters. And a lot of the open world activities like there's shrines that you can pray at, there's temples that have scrolls that you can find, and the Kujikiri as well. Like all of these give you what's called knowledge points. So knowledge points, as you accrue them, unlock more skills in your skill tree. So whereas Valhalla kind of had this like really overwhelming skill tree that had hundreds of nodes. It's more paced. It's paced out better in Shadows, where like everything you're doing is kind of contributing to that knowledge rank or contributing more meaningfully to your character progression.
When you're
It
getting
just feels
knowledge
like
points to get new skills for Naoi and Yasuke, is it's like a limited resource where like you have to choose between them, or do they both get that skill point? So you're
they both get it. Yeah, any skill
okay.
points you earn, any levels you earn, are all shared between Naoi and Yasuke. So it really is just like which character you prefer playing as.
Okay.
I guess it's also important to say that like there is still kind of a modern day story here. It's not anywhere near substantial as any of the previous games, but you can kind of it's weird. There's disruptions that you can find in the Animus as you go that are kind of story based. But then there's this weird system where there's like daily or weekly challenges you can do.
Oh
Uh,
no.
Yeah, this is
Okay.
yeah,
that's
and so you
kind of
can
where I want to go on that. Is it's got a battle pass. I mean, it's got a rotating store, and it's got the equivalent of a
Mhm.
battle pass, and that relates to the
So
modern day stuff.
the modern
yeah.
newbie. Yeah.
Bizarrely, the modern day story is kind of battle passed out, where you do these weekly challenges, you get points, and then as you progress through the battle pass, you unlock like diary entries or electronic entries you can go and read in the Animus.
That's
There
weird.
are little bits in the main story where you see Animus disruptions.
For
But
battle passing story bits now,
yeah,
or like story fluff. Okay.
but if you want to see more outside of that, you got to do the weekly
Yeah,
challenges.
I gotta get
Which like
my modern day Assassin's
yeah,
Creed story. Gotta get it.
I've
My
only seen
weekly
like two of these
anomaly.
modern day things because like I said, they're weekly challenges. So I've only been able to do 4 because I've only
What
had the
the
game
fuck?
for a week.
That's
So
insane. That's one of the most insane things I've learned about this game so far. That's new, I guess. That's a way
I
to do
think
it's a
it.
you're kind of
choice for
this.
sure.
What this reminds me of actually is Black Flag, the framing of it.
Okay.
Um, in because like in I do remember. I mean, I spent enough time with the Origins, Odyssey, Valhalla to know that the modern day story in those games centered around one character, kind of like
Yeah.
a second protagonist after Des. I mean, you could call her a second protagonist after Desmond Miles, where this lady Layla, what's her? I
Layla
can't.
Hassan.
Yes, yes, there. And then she's got an arc of her own, and then there's a whole thing with her. And but here you kind of you're right. You're sort of if you're sort of a faceless person where the animus ghosts or something seem to be talking to you directly, and you're just some person using this animus tech to experience memories. And in fact, the start of it shows you where, oh, welcome to our animus ego software, your new mindfulness app.
They're
And
never they're never gonna replicate that the feeling that everyone got when like at the Assassin's Creed 2 ending, like the final boss or goddess or whatever, like
yeah, where
looks
they're
at you at the
talking to
camera
you.
directly. It's
Right,
all you know what I'm talking about. So what the fuck are
yeah.
you talking? Why are you doing
Yo,
that?
who's Desmond?
Yeah,
What are
When
you
you boot
talking
up the
about?
game, actually, it's kind of weird because you see that cutscene that just talked about, and then it boots you to like an Animus menu, and you can
Yeah,
see Shadows, and you can see Mirage, and
yeah.
Valhalla, and
Now there's an
Odyssey, and
animus front
Origins.
end.
yeah. They're trying to build that whole like connected
Yeah,
Assassin's Creed multiverse thing in the
yeah.
future.
And of course, if you go to like the Origins section, you can click a link to take you to the store to buy the game. So
Yeah,
Join.
it would be funnier to me if they had built it out as like Animus Connect and then made it look exactly like Ubisoft Connect or whatever they're calling Uplay now, like a third launcher.
Ay, ay, ay. Uh,
That would make so
ugh.
many people mad.
So I
It just
oh
feels like they're trying to make it the Call of Duty launcher to have all
Yeah,
their
yeah,
games in
Call
it
of
oh yeah,
Duty front end.
absolutely.
because it even like on PS5 when you go to the game tile and you do like manage game and add-ons to see what DLC you have, it randomly listed a lot of stuff I own for Mirage and Valhalla over there. So it is detecting the stuff installed if you have the stuff on your system. So I don't know. I wasn't actually gonna download like how many ever 200 GB of Valhalla to find out if it lets me boot up from the same title screen. But yeah, I don't know what it is detecting that stuff over there. And I was annoyed because I was hoping there would be a good title screen for Assassin's Creed Shadows, but it's just this confusing Animus menu. And there's a separate, you have to press the touchpad to go to the system settings, but to get back, you have to press another button and all. It's kind of annoying to deal
What the
with.
hell?
So yeah.
I think the lack of a title screen is actually really disappointing because this game is gorgeous. Like it is one of
Yeah.
the best looking games on modern systems. Like the era of Japan that they've recreated it, there's so many gorgeous environments and sunsets and backdrops and fields and forests
The
and
trees. I want
yeah.
to talk about
And
the
so
trees.
like not having some really stunning title screen or even a title screen that can like swap between the different regions as you go through them. They could have done some really cool stuff with that.
One of the things they emphasized when they first announced this game was like they had this whole system to showcase like seasons changing in real time and having like gameplay implications, like like maybe during like the winter you have like better ways to stealth around. Did you feel that at all? Like when you're going through the game of like just general like when the seasons are changing, did that change up anything that you were doing, or it's like cool, it's a different change of scenery?
It was sort of the seasons change actually. um the seasons kind of changed. Their mechanic is a little bit confusing at first, where the seasons sort of change if you've spent enough time out and you do a fast travel. Suddenly the season changes, and so it kind of like becomes another aspect of how they treat weather, where it's sort of randomish, and it affects conditions like in winter there's you can make more noise, and when it's in fall and summer and so on, there's a bit more noise cover from the from the wildlife and the crickets and whatnot. But I mean, like in that sense, it becomes sort of an environmental thing, but it's not so detailed that all of a sudden you have to change up your whole approach. It's more
Okay.
like it just adds a few wrinkles to like an infiltration.
And I assume just
Yeah.
the general scenery and the
I
way
mean,
they
like
depict
way
seasons
more
is
important for the stealth is like light levels.
okay.
And I mean, this was sort of part of the marketing, but yeah, they definitely redid the stealth completely, and it reminded me a lot of Metal Gear Solid 5, where the especially in contrast to old Assassin's Creed, where if you're in a bush, you're completely invisible to them, to an enemy or something. Light levels, like if you are in the daytime, it's so much harder to sneak, and the enemies have much longer sight lines where they won't necessarily run at you immediately, but you start getting detected as soon as they turn their heads if you are not kind of prone and in a place where that's especially like if you're out in the daytime, if you're not prone and in cover, even on normal mode, you'll see these enemies will start to get sight of you pretty quickly, and you actually have to be. I mean, you have to treat it like a real stealth game, and that was pretty refreshing after the previous games where stealth more just sort of felt like a concession to what Assassin's Creed used to be.
Yeah, I mean, Odyssey and Valhalla not really stealthy, known for their stealth, and and Mirage had to be the one to kind of rein it in again to stealth is important again.
Yeah.
Um,
With the seasons and exploration, one other thing that kind of ties in, the seasons change, it refills your scouts that you
Yeah,
have. When you're going for objectives, kind of like the last few games, it gives you like bullet points of where people are. So like, oh, they're in this region, they're in this castle, they're in this town, and you have to
yeah.
find where they
It
are.
doesn't put a big marker. I mean, it doesn't put the marker right over their heads anymore.
Yeah. But you can use scouts to search an area and narrow that down, but you only
Interesting.
have a handful of scouts and they refill at the end of the season. But if you don't like the scout system, you can actually go into the menu and completely turn it off and just get straight up guided to the exact objective that you want. It's kind of like the scout system is kind of cool and it does play into the whole system, but it's just kind of that weird Ubisoft thing where they're like, if you don't like it, you can just completely change the way the game plays if you really want.
I respect that, but yeah, it's an interesting it's a as it plays by default. It's an interesting twist. Like they can do the same thing for now a stealth gameplay, right? You can just turn on one hit assassinations, and that's a significant change from in stealth for Naoi because she's more vulnerable, and so you have to be a lot more careful about killing off elite enemies where you can't just sneak up behind them and exterminate them because most in unless you've got like the right arrangement of perks or and stuff on your gear, you won't be able to take down an elite enemy in one go, and then you'll have to do some fighting against them, and they usually can call reinforcements. And but if you don't feel like that, you can jump into the menu and make sure that you will kill them in one hit as long as you can get up behind them in stealth. So, yeah, it's kind of that. I wouldn't say it's a lack of confidence, but you can in fact change the game the way the game completely works. I mean, it works completely if you so choose.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I don't know. It is toggleable, so it's really just up to the player to decide how they want to experience it. So,
So I have a
Um,
question. I see some clips of this game. Why does the game always goes in black and white during combat, and the blood just becomes red and everything's just black and white? I'm not really familiar with this game, so
That's like a stylistic thing. Whenever you do like a execution move or an assassination, so like when you kill a target, it turns to that screen for like a added visual flair.
in general, since we've been on Shadows for some time, but just based on like how the past Assassin's Creeds you've played, whether it was recently or not, like is this like a strong, solid entry into the series? For the series, is this like just in general, where does it fare? Like where Assassin's Creed has been going? Um, is it like is it worth it? Pretty much.
I'd say so. Like as I said, I bounced off of all the other Assassin's Creed games of that. I mean, of this kind of gameplay here. Of this since the pivot from the old style. And this doesn't. I feel like I could commit to this. I mean, I'm not quite all the way in yet, but it doesn't. It feels more. It feels less like it's big for its own sake, the way Origins did, the way Odyssey did, and the way Valhalla seems to do. To hear it from you guys talking about it, but I mean, it's big definitely, and I think it's still a little too big for its gameplay systems to really support. But it makes better to me at least. It's made much better use of that scale. Not just in presentation, but like in making gameplay feel like you're not just doing things because you can.
How about you, Hayes? Where do you fall on Shadows?
Yeah, I think I pretty much agree with Josh, actually. I think, you know, the RPG change to the series has been interesting, but I think it started going too far in the wrong direction with Valhalla. And I think Shadows is kind of a attempt to blend the RPG elements and the classic elements. It still has some problems that Assassin's Creed has suffered from, like that bloat and kind of doing the same thing over and over. But I think that there's a thoughtfulness here to try and put the series back onto a track that people want and try and get that unique identity back again. Because I think despite interesting things that Origins and Odyssey and Valhalla did, in a lot of ways you could say that they're trying too much to be like The Witcher 3 almost.
Hmm.
Um, this feels more uniquely Assassin's Creed again. And the story does some interesting things. It starts out slow, but it goes some places. A lot of the core gameplay does some unique things. So I think it's a good entry that creates a new kind of blueprint that can be built upon to bring the series back to what Assassin's Creed has been known for so long.
And
Yeah.
Hayes, did you
Also,
write about this
okay.
on Inverse or no? Just
Not
curious.
yet. I actually have a piece going up sometime in the next few days on PC Gamer about
Oh,
kind of
okay.
like contrasting this and Valhalla. But I haven't written a lot about it because I went straight to GDC after I played it. So
And what you're
Okay.
saying, Josh?
Yeah. On that thing with the just about the presentation of the story, it's also a lot more. This is something I didn't see as much of in the previous games, where and even in the original, even in the pre RPG Assassin's Creeds, but this one is a lot more explicit, I guess, about being a work of historical fiction. I mean, like it's a lot more obvious about how it pulls from cinema. I mean, the cutscene where that opens on that shows you the title, the cold open for the title screen has a modern like an Enka sounding soundtrack. I was like, my first reaction was like, is this Tarantino? Are they pulling from a Tarantino, or are they doing a or are they which genre of film are they being inspired by? So there's like montages, there's pop soundtrack, there's a level of pop soundtrack, um, and it's a lot more. Whereas the previous games kind of made it feel like you're watching the secret history. This is sort of a documentary, but here is like, nah, you're not gonna mistake this for being the real true story behind the Crusades or anything like that. But it's an interesting pivot in that way to me. I mean, stylistically at least.
Okay. Any final thoughts on Shadows? To close it out, just um, would you just like generally recommend it for people like if they're interested in like playing an open world Assassin's Creed game? Like, do you think it is like the best one of these in the since the action RPG pivot?
I think
I
it's
think
the
this is.
most
Oh,
coherent
go ahead.
one so far.
Okay.
Like I would if someone's I don't know if it would really change your opinion if you're completely burned out on this template, especially like if you're burned out on Assassin's Creed template right now, or if you're burned out on the way Ubisoft does open world. I don't think it's necessarily going to change your mind. But if you're like me and have been sort of disconnected from that formula for a while, this is a pretty good place to come back to it.
How about you, Hayes?
I think this is the best Assassin's Creed since Origins in my
Okay.
mind. So I think if you enjoy classic AC, it's worth jumping in. If you found yourself a little burned out by the RPG games, I still think it's worth jumping in. And like I said, this is just like flat out one of the most gorgeous open world games we've gotten this generation. So, there are some flaws and know that going in, but I think if you just want a good open world game that you can kind of just explore at your own pace, I think it's a good option.
Okay. Cool. I know some of you had to leave for personal commitments. Obviously, it's gonna be a long podcast. Going through the news and stuff. I'm not 100% sure who had to leave and who was staying.
Well,
um,
it's in the middle of the night for Mikhail, so let's let him go.
And Josh.
Unless you want to say it. And yeah, middle of the night for both of you. So yeah,
yeah.
obviously I don't have no regrets covering at length the GDC coverage, the Xenoblade Chronicles Cross Definitive Edition coverage, and the of course Assassin's Creed Shadow coverage. So do give out all those reviews, a look through the Xenoblade Chronicles Cross review on RPG site and over at Inverse. We have the review in progress for Assassin's Creed Shadows up on RPG site, and then keep an eye out for Hayes' feature over at PC Gamer when it goes up. But yeah, we're gonna go into news. So if anyone needs to step out, we understand it's been a long podcast.
Yeah, we don't normally do two big games all at once, but that's just the way the release schedule
Just
lined up. This
Yeah. Thank you so much, Hayes, for being able to join us here on the pod. It was nice having you. It's been awesome speaking to you.
Sure, yeah. Thank you so much for having me on. I'm gonna jump off to go do something I have to do, but I'd love to be back again sometime. It was great to talk.
Yep, and thank you also, Mikhail, and thank you also, Josh Tolentino, for staying up at ungodly hours at your where you're at to speak with us.
Oh, it was great. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
We'll have to do a Tetracast like East hemisphere where we get up in the middle of the night. Just to be fair.
That's right.
Before we get into news outright, we'll probably at least call out some of the features we have on RPGsite.net from GDC, though a lot of these are James's, and I know you're still working on some. So I'll probably just point to them here, and then we'll probably go into detail discussing them potentially on next week's episode. So I know James has a preview up for a few indie games that are coming out. We have Steel Century Groove. We brought up this one when it was first announced. This is the one where it's giant robots in a dance-off. So I don't know if he got hands-on, but he did get to preview this over at GDC. He also has a preview from Wuchang Fallen Feathers. This is the Souls-like from Lean Z Games. We talked about this in passing. Aaron was able to put up an interview and a preview for the upcoming Guardians of Azuma, the Rune Factory action spin-off that's coming out in May. So we have those two features up on the site, both a preview as well as an interview with the producer Hisashi Fuji for that game. Out of all these previews, the one, Adam, that I might lean into for this episode, just to see if there's anything to glean from it at a high level, is that you got to talk to the staff of Clair Obscur Expedition 33. I'm trying to figure out which specifically you spoke to over. It looks like producer Francois Maurice. It's a French name, pardon me. So I don't know if there's any like big takeaways from that opportunity that you wanted to go into, or we can delay that when James.
No, that's totally good. No, I actually did most of the interview. James was there, of course, too. We both asked questions, but
James was present.
I played the Dance Battle indie game too. It's like Pokemon with robots and dancing. It's hard for me to know like how well that I guess idea can last throughout the game, but it's definitely like unique. I don't know. It's Pokemon dancing it's Pokemon but with mechs and they're dancing, and that's what it is. But yeah, that's like literally like a 1 or 2 person team game, like very as indie as you can get. Anyways, so James did the preview for Wuchang Fallen Feathers, and I did not see that. I had some other ones that I'll be writing up later, which we'll talk about next week. But yeah, so there was an Xbox event at GDC, and there's a bunch of games there. Clair Obscur is one of them. Just to kind of touch on them very lightly, there was Mandragora, which is a side-scrolling Souls-like-ish RPG that was there. That's coming out in mid-April, which I don't think I'll do a preview for that because it's coming out so soon. Might do a review, though. There was also the mascot... Promise Mascot Agency? Is that what it's called? Promise Mascot Agency was at the event. And a few other games there. The Hotel Barcelona from... what's the guy's name? Suda? Or Swery? Yeah.
Both of them are involved with the Hotel Barcelona.
Yeah, that was there too. But anyways, Clair Obscur. So we got to talk to the producer of the game, and we got to ask him a few questions about, inspirations and origins and things like that. And first of all, we also asked him, what does Clair Obscur mean? And he basically said outright that they already have like a larger kind of franchise in mind. And Clair Obscur is like a reference to an Italian painting technique, which I'm not going to try to pronounce, but it has to do with like light and dark, which you could kind of obviously see how that could fit into like themes and narratives and things like that. But Expedition 33 is actually what they like refer to this game internally. Like that's the game's title, is Expedition 33, where Clair Obscur is more like the franchise title.
Yeah, so they already have like plans, like bigger plans.
Yeah, they're actually already thinking about a sequel. They're thinking about other media. Didn't they already announce some sort of TV adaptation?
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So like that's of Expedition 33 specifically. But yeah, read the interview. It's not that long. It's a pretty quick interview. Talking about inspiration. So the producer that we talked to isn't like the creative director. He joined on relatively early in the process, but the creative director is actually Guillaume Broche, and the creative director, he grew up on Final Fantasy games, so there's a huge Final Fantasy influence. Things like Final Fantasy 8, 9, and 10 specifically was what he like cited. And according to the producer that we talked to, Francois Maurice, he's a big fan of the Final Fantasy games, but also he's a big fan of. He mentioned Chrono Trigger, of course, Earthbound, Undertale. He mentioned Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door as part of the action reactive combat stuff. What's actually sort of fun is, if I understood him correctly, Francois said he had not played Final Fantasy X or Persona 5 before he joined the team. And Guillaume, the creative director, basically kind of gave him that homework, like, hey, play Final Fantasy X and play Persona 5. And he did, and he loved both of them. And he even said, like, Final Fantasy X is a masterpiece. And you can kind of see, like, the turn-based stylings there, of course, for both of those games. But yeah, we just talked about, like, the various inspirations. A big one is that the game was originally just going to be turn-based. It was turn-based at its core. It was always designed to be turn-based because the team, especially the creative director, loves turn-based games. But then he was playing Sekiro, and he loved the parrying of Sekiro and how that felt. He loved how that felt, and he's like, I want to incorporate this into this turn-based game. And that's kind of how it started. Was he grew up with Final Fantasy, wanted to make a turn-based game, but then was like, oh wow, this Sekiro, the feeling of parrying is so cool and so thrilling that he wanted to put it in his game. So that's kind of how it came in. And of course, they've done a bunch of like fine-tuning and tweaking to try to, how they're going to fit this in. And the producer that we talked to, Francois, said like, not everyone likes parrying, but there are like builds in the games and equipments in the game that allow you to like make parrying easier or have better bonuses there, and allow you to kind of work around, how you approach things like this in terms of like, because some people like, they just don't like this sort of reactive mechanics. They don't like the dodging or the whatever or timing, but they have some builds in the game to kind of like allow people to play with a slightly different builds and play styles. And that's in addition to like options to turn it off entirely.
Yeah.
And I think Scott actually went through this in his preview that he wrote up, which he was pretty positive. Like, I think there's a mode where you can kind of turn off the QTEs for the reactive stuff, where you don't ever get the best outcomes, but you'll never get the worst outcomes. Kind of like a middle ground. You can just turn them off and don't have to worry about it. So
no, that kind of reminds me on Shadow Hearts. I remember, the match
ring.
the ring.
Yeah.
I remember if you had to like get a certain ratio to get this accessory where it auto does it for you. I think you need to at least hit like an 80% ratio or something like that.
Oh yeah, I
Judgment
remember
ring.
that. As far as I know, there's nothing like that.
Where's the judgment ring in this game?
He also mentioned about, very briefly about working with Kepler Interactive, which is the publisher. And of course, he's not going to say anything bad about the publisher, but it's like very supportive, collaborative, making decisions together. He said it was important to him that the game also had French audio in addition to English audio, because these guys are French, right? It does not have Japanese audio yet. I don't know if there's plans for it. He did say that they're actually really happy that they were able to get this game published in Japan by Sega. Sega's not doing the Western publishing, but they're doing the Japanese publishing. And they've already had interviews, and they're going to have a physical edition in Japan and things like that. And he said that's really cool. Obviously, these guys grew up fans of Japanese games, so the fact that they can make one and sell it there with a Japanese localization, no Japanese voices, but they're very, happy about that. So read the interview. I think it's just kind of a nice, relatively quick chat. And read Scott's preview also.
Yeah, that's coming out next month, right? Like
about a month
April?
from now.
Yeah. Almost there.
Mm-hmm.
And with that, we'll go into news. Not a lot of news this week, but we'll go into the few things we do have. We have a lot of dates. So the very end section of this podcast kind of backloaded and kind of filling out April and May with a lot of indie releases and a few other things. In terms of like game announcements, not a lot. We have one indie game listed here. Tell me if you've heard this before. It's a poker roguelike. It's called Hero's Hand, and it's slated for release on all consoles and PC next year. So it's kind
Balatro.
of
Got it.
yeah. There you go. But like the thing is, though, is that like it's possible for two completely
I
separate
know. I
entities
know.
to have similar ideas, but of course that comparison is going to be natural. Apparently it's got a lot of inspiration from Dungeons and Dragons. I'm sure Balatro as well. Kind of like a comedic themings to this game and a very kind of cutesy, fun, colorful art style. It's from Villain Games, and I don't know if it's their debut project, but it's the first one that we've kind of covered. So we have the announcement trailer. This was from Day of the Devs, which was kind of over the last week. We had that event, and we had the future games had a few handful of trailers over the last week. So that's where some of these updates are coming from. But yeah, Hero's Hand, you know, deck based roguelike, Balatro like. Slated for 2026.
Balatro won Game of the Year at the GDC Awards.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah,
What was actually kind of
congratulations.
funny is so Local Thunk is he's the creator of Balatro. He's a very like private person. No one knows what he looks like. So the publisher Playstack, their PR guys, like kept going up to like accept all the awards, and I'm assuming they've done this many times. Where they're like, I am not Local Thunk. He's not Local Thunk. She's not Local Thunk. We're not Local Thunk, but we are the publisher, and we are accepting this on his behalf. Thank you, Local Thunk, for making this great game. So
I respect the vision of that developer, man. I respect the not wanting to go public. Like I remember like he's been posting up like stories about like the development, like just the mindset, the process of this game, and just not thinking at all, had no expectations it would go this way. It's like I expected to sell like 5 copies, and I was like two, like my family and friends, pretty much.
there's also just some funny jokes that are kind of floating around. His name is not even John, but people are like, "Are you John Local Thunk?" He's like, "No, I'm John Playstack."
I love that.
That's pretty fun. We have a handful of updates for upcoming games that aren't accompanied through trailers, though I guess one of them is. This one's a little bit more kind of biz dev focused than actually like, press release, be excited about this. A few weeks ago, we talked about Mekarashi, which was it's from Blackjack Studios, and I kind of teed up the history of this game. It was originally licensed out from Square Enix to be a front mission game, front mission Borderscape. Then, when they no longer, for whatever reason, had access to the IP, or they're no longer working with Square Enix, they rebranded it as Metal Storm, releasing worldwide as Mekarashi. And we said, oh, that's kind of an interesting lineage for a game. We'll keep an eye on it. Well, apparently, Square Enix has filed to sue the studio for copyright infringement, saying, you're using front mission. I've not read. I looked up the link that we put in to our article, courtlistener.com, which kind of gives the idea about when it was filed, the wording of the complaint and things like that. But I haven't dived into like what the specific issues are. But apparently, whatever break between Square Enix and Blackjack Studio or the new publisher potentially Zion Games was not amicable in some way. That's my reading of this. So I don't know if that puts Mekarashi's release in question or if this is going to be settled elsewhere. This is obviously not the sort of news that we typically cover, but it's interesting that we went from this is a way to leverage the work they've done on this game to still get it to release, but now it's got this court proceeding occurring in parallel that we have no idea how this is going to potentially impact.
Yeah,
what this
it's
would be
interesting
doing.
because like this game released in Japan already, like late
Yeah.
last year in October, and someone actually mentioned that in the comments, and Kite was even clarified that yeah, like Square Enix actually like behind the scenes already kind of had like disputes over it releasing it over there. Just they never went public with it until these lawsuits got sent to the courts along it. So as far as I know, the English global release of Mekarashi is still set to go. They stopped their Steam page up, but like I believe the Japanese and South Korean versions got geo-locked in their respective countries. So it's kind of like in a weird situation where, as far as we know, everything is still set to like for it to release sometime this year in the West. They haven't. I don't think they've given like a firm date yet on it, and they're still running their local, like their promo cycle. They're still releasing new promo material for it up until its launch. So I don't know if there's going to be like some sort of like what I think is going to most likely scenario is there's going to be like a silent like back settlement agreement on this, and then we'll never hear from it again, and everything will just
Yeah.
proceed as normal because that's usually how it goes. But it is interesting that like Square Enix is like finally following up on like it was weird already. They're like, oh, they canceled this front mission Borderscape game, but then like since they're now moving away from the front mission IP, they're still releasing something that looks pretty similar to front mission. And it's like, is that okay with Square Enix? What about like the previous development assets they had on hand? And now this is kind of the follow up to that situation. They're like, no, Square Enix is not happy that Blackjack Studio and Xeon game still went through with what is now known as Mekarashi. So, you know, um, these things do happen, here and there in this space, especially when it comes to very similar looking mechanics from based on inspiration from like the IP that they're making like a spiritual successor of. Sometimes it kind of gets like Chow and I, many years ago, talked about this with Shiro Neko Project and Dragalia Lost.
Yeah,
You know,
it's like saying they stole their gameplay system.
yeah,
What?
so it's kind of kind of a not that similar situation, but it's in the same, you know,
Lots
same
of
end
like,
of
yeah, there's lots of things that happen. I mean, I
yeah.
think last year, or is it the year before, it was Konami suing side games, saying that they stole their EXP system or something. It's just like, oh my god.
Yeah, it's tricky out there. It's really tricky. So, well, we'll see. I mean, I'm still willing to give the English version of this game a shot because I didn't hate the Japanese, version when I played. But I was like, I don't want to go through this right now. But since there's a PC client, maybe be hustled too. I have a soft spot for mecha SRPGs, whether no matter what platform they're on, no matter if they're handheld design focused. I need to get them where I can because it seems
We
like
don't
they're
have enough of them.
yeah they're dwindling these days. Okay, I need to get it where I can.
The second game we kind of have an update for is for the recently announced Digimon Story Time Stranger. So this we finally, we've known that they've been working on a Digimon Story for a while now. We finally got the reveal of Time Stranger back at I think it was the State of Play in February. So now we kind of have more details coming out of Digimon Con, which I suppose was in the last week, about exactly what, who's working on Time Stranger, its scope compared to the previous games in the subseries, etc. Uh, some of the things, some of the highlights from this are it has a lot of the same key staff members from Cyber Sleuth, the more recent game, the same character designer, Suzuhito Yasuda, who I kind of intrinsically think as the Digimon character designer at this point.
The
Though they
Devil
did also work
Survivor
on
is a
like
character
yeah, I was
designer.
yeah, I was gonna say I have played Devil Survivor 1, so I also do associate them with that character art as well. The boss designer is the same, and this one I wasn't sure. Goes by the name OH exclamation great. So that
Hmm.
that one I was like that like kind of goes by that sort of stage name. Uh, is still the boss designer, and then the composer is Masafumi Takada. They talked about how the digital world will be more accessible. You'll access it more frequently in this game compared to the previous games, which I guess you access the actual digital world, not as often. They say over 450 Digimon will be available to collect, so it has a very large roster. I'm not sure offhand how that compares to um, the other games. Other than that, it's higher. They're saying it's higher, but I'm not sure exactly how much higher compared to Cyber Sleuth or the
Yeah, so
original.
yeah, they're saying it's around 450 Digimon in Time Stranger, and that's uh, uh Cyber Sleuth plus Hacker's Memory had like a grand total of around 330, so it's a significantly higher
Gotcha,
cap. Yeah.
Mhm.
So that's awesome. They also revealed the names of the protagonists. The male MC's name is Dan Yuki, and the female protagonist is Kanan Yuki. Whichever protagonist you select, the other protagonist is still involved in the story. They'll serve as your operator. So you might hear like
Pretty
more
cool.
lines from the protagonist that you don't choose because they're your operator and they're gonna be constantly yapping at you during missions. Um, they also unveiled the new character, the one of the main heroines of the story, Inori Misono, and her partner Digimon Aegeomon. The design of Aegeomon is weird because it reminds me of like Haseo from Dot Hack GU, but younger. I'll put a picture in the staff chat, even though this is not going to be helpful for audio listeners, obviously. But you know, the
They also revealed
Aegeomon.
the starter Digimon, and me, who has been out of the loop of Digimon, like I haven't even seen like those Try movies from 10 years ago, let alone like the reboot series or whatever. Like, hey, I recognize these starters: Patamon,
Yeah,
Gomamon, and Demi Devamon. I know these guys; these are
yeah,
classics.
yeah, that's right.
I,
I love the social media post. Someone said to these starter selections, like imagining Professor Oak walking up to you and be like, "Hey yo, do you want the Archangel Michael, the Demiurge, or this really cool seal that I found?" And it's like, yeah, that's pretty much an accurate statement to these starters. Which is very fun. I don't know who I'm gonna pick yet. I really like all three of them. I have a because I'm a Digimon season one through season three kid. I have a very
Mhm.
strong connection with all three of
I'll
these.
be the lame guy. I got to go for the War Greymon somehow.
None of them turned to War Greymon,
I
so I
know,
don't
but
know.
I gotta get War Greymon. This is my end game goal in every Digimon
I
game.
mean, you're definitely gonna get Agumon easily in this game.
They
They,
should
they,
put 450 Digimon in, but not put Agumon. Just
oh, that'd
just
be
leave.
awesome. Damn, that'd be hard because there's so many Greymon variants. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Um, they also confirmed like they already they mentioned this when they were first mentioned that they were working on a new Digimon story game before this game was revealed, but they reconfirmed that hey, they're gonna have the Olympus 12 be directly involved in this game because in other previous titles you hear about the Olympus 12, but they never really become relevant. So this is kind of like a big thing for Digimon fans. It's like finally the Olympus 12 is gonna be you know involved. They're all gonna be involved and like gonna meet up and shit, which is fun, awesome. They shared like some clips of the locale, like some locales in the digital world in this game, which was fun because like they showed you like a bar where like all these Digimon are hanging out. Like you see like Arukenimon, which is like the big spider protagonist in season two, like hanging out there, drinking. You have like Lilymon as a waitress there. You had I think it's called Zubamon, which is like the third evolution of Gomamon, like the ultimate evolution, like the turtle one.
Mhm.
He's like a blacksmith at like the home hub, like which is really cool. It's just basically like a lived in place, but with all Digimon in it and like recognizable Digimon from the first like first three seasons. It's like, oh, I know that one. It's awesome. That was my favorite one. Um, the one that the trailer that we have up on the site shows was the big new trailer that they showed off at Digimon Con, which basically just shows like a move showcase from several Digimon in that in Time Stranger. A lot like recognizable Digimon like Terriermon, Vmon, Stingmon, Edamon and Metal Edamon, Angelwomon, but there's even ones that like that haven't been in the series yet. I forget their names, but that it does showcase in the video. There's other Digimon from the newer crowd that they will like. I'm like, yeah, that Digimon looks cool too. But I
Have
like the
they
ones
have
that I
they shown
recognize.
Renamon yet?
Yes, they showed
Okay,
Renamon.
because
Yep.
Which
that's
one's
all. That's all
Renamon?
Junior. That's all Junior cares about.
Renamon is like the yellow one, right? That stands upright.
It's
I
like a
think that was
fox,
Renamon. Yeah,
which of
Oh,
course
yep, yep.
Junior would like.
Renamon's at 32 seconds into the trailer.
there you go.
There.
They showed Gallantmon. I really like, but yeah. So I mean, cool stuff. They unfortunately they didn't like show off anything else. Like there's no release date or window that we have outside of this year still. But you know, th- so far they've been saying the right things, and that's good. I'm excited. I really want I didn't really like Cyber Sleuth. Hacker's Memory is a little bit better, but I didn't really cling on to those games. But I hope this new game is the one that like really, sweeps me off my feet. I really want this game to be like, the Digimon game and I hope it is.
The Digimon game to play if you like RPGs and you're either a current or lapsed fan of Digimon.
Yeah. So I can't wait. I can't wait to see what else they have in.
And the last update before we get into like trailers, this one's a little bit more minor, but still worth shouting out. Obviously, back in February, we got the global release of Trails Through Daybreak 2. Obviously, the PC support for that series has been well supported by Durante and PH3. They went back to port in a bunch of newer, contemporary technologies into the Daybreak 2 PC port. This is things like DLSS4 and TAA. I actually put this on the podcast mainly because I saw James skeet about this, saying like, "Oh, this clearly shows that they've been working on Kaino Kaseki," and I kind of wanted to pick his brain, like, what about this suggests like Kaino Kaseki? I don't really know, um, but
I
even
don't see it
regardless of
there. I just think it's more like, oh, if he's doing something like this, you could just bring this feature to Kai. It's like, why would you implement this like all of a sudden?
But it's also like that. Like it's an open secret that we'll probably get Kai in the West from East America and PhD Durante at some point in the future.
yeah,
The only question now is whether it's this year or next year.
Yeah,
I
it's
think
a
that's
basic question
yeah.
when. It's like
yeah.
the guy's working on it. It's like telling it's like, I wonder if Square Enix is working on Final Fantasy
I wonder if
17.
Nintendo's working on a new Mario. It really makes me. I don't know. I don't know about that Mario.
There's some smart things here. Like for instance, like if you have your render scale set at a value primarily less than 100%, and now it doesn't affect UI elements like the map or the menus, we're like, oh, that makes sense that you could render the game at a lower, internal resolution, but it doesn't make your map all blurry. So kind of some fun adjustments there. And Mikhail went into a really like reported on the detail that PH3 put into their update about all the kind of smart under the hood improvements that they made to the PC port, which of course, even coming out was, top,
Yeah.
first class compared to all the other porting houses.
And
But it's good.
I always feel like news like this stings a little because it makes at least me wonder and probably other people wonder. It's like I wonder how the PC port of Trails of the Sky the First is gonna be because as far as we know,
Yeah.
the Ronte and PhD are not working on that. So just like
Minimum
it's
options.
I don't know. I'm like bracing myself for the worst, but I'm hoping for the best. It's cool that they're doing this. I'm happy for it, but it's just like, man, what's that Trails of the Sky the remake gonna look like then? Is it gonna have awesome DLSS 4 TAA and all this other shit in it? Is it gonna be awesome like these ports? I don't know.
And some of the stuff, if you read through this, it's really interesting to see Peter talk about this, Peter Toman Durante, because, like, for instance, I guess the engine is custom, and there was no like, he had to implement the TAA and implementation from scratch. So he knew the basics. He referenced a paper about the overview, and basically had to just like invent it and do it. Like for us on the receiving end, it's like, oh, they added this, so it's a drop down. But it's like, how much work went into that just to like, oh, I'm going to build this from scratch for this custom engine to be able to implement it into this game that didn't originally, launch with this capability. So some of that stuff, it's easy to take for granted. So it's always cool to kind of get a small sliver of a look in about the work that goes on, behind the scenes in order to support these sorts of updates. We have a couple trailers here. I don't think we have to spend a lot of time on each of these. We have the second character trailer for Clair Obscur Expedition 33. We had the first one for Gustav last week. This week it's I think it's pronounced Maelle, but I'm not 100% sure actually. So Mai, I believe, is the one that has the stances. So the stances, like she can have a stance where she deals and takes more damage, and you can change these stances on the fly. I know when Scott was playing the preview, the virtuoso stance was kind of like the pure DPS glass cannon stance. So the trailer isn't really a primer; it's more for flavor, but does show a little bit of this in like some of the combat highlights. So that is kind of put in, and I assume we'll see the trailer for the third combatant whose name I'm forgetting in the next couple of weeks. During Future Game Show, we got a new trailer for Mandragora, Whispers of the Witch Tree. So this one is releasing in less than a month on April 25th. April 17th. So we got a new trailer for that.
I played this
And then
at GDC.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, it's definitely like it's so the thing with side scroller RPGs is sometimes they're like very light RPGs, like, oh, this has a skill tree or it has some levels, but it's like about as a basic of an implementation as you can get. This one is definitely pretty dense relative to other side scroller RPGs. Like, there are 6 different classes, and each class has like its own like sphere grid. It's like a sphere grid skill tree. And not only that, but like when you pick a class, you can actually use any of the 6 sphere grids. So there's a lot of opportunity for like class intermixing and skill building and things like that. It is a Souls-like, you die, you lose your souls. They're not
Hollow
called souls.
Knight-like.
Yeah, you can pick them up. But it is like something that I'm keeping an eye on. Obviously, from a demo at GDC, it's a little bit hard to tell, like what's the story like, or how good is the progression long term. But it's a pretty dense side-scrolling RPG for sure.
And then I was going to ask you about this last one, Adam. This one is a release date, but I threw it in the trailer section because this game is being basically sold based on it's a remaster of System Shock 2. System Shock 2 25th Anniversary Remaster. We talked a little bit about your time with the System Shock remake from 2023. So System Shock 2 25th Anniversary is releasing on June 26th. And along with this, they showed basically this trailer go from the original graphics to the remastered graphics and back. Of course, like we talked about, it is a remaster and not a remake. But did you get to either talk to or get hands-on with System Shock 2 while at GDC?
Yeah, I actually will have I had a light interview conversation with a couple of people at Night Dive. Larry Cooperman, who is like the VP of business development, as well as Grover Wimberly, who is a producer at Night Dive. And I got to play a little bit of the demo, got to have like a kind of a chat. I am going to do a preview of this game shortly here, so it'll probably be up in the next couple of days. And basically, like, Night Dive got the rights to System Shock like a decade ago. And, this is something they've always wanted to do, especially System Shock 2 being so beloved. But the System Shock 1 remake took more time and effort and resources than they were anticipating. But it was like a huge learning experience. They're really happy with the result, of that remake that I talked about last week. And then Larry was saying that Night Dive has been courted by a lot of different developers, including like Bethesda and id Software, to do stuff like Doom and Quake and Dark Forces and all these different projects. And that slowed things down because they have to shuffle people around. They have to do these things. But the way he put it is like, these guys are like old school classic PC nerds. If id Software comes up to them and says like, hey, we want to do a new version of Doom, they're not going to say no. They want to do it. We talked about this, how many projects they're doing. And he basically said for the foreseeable future, they kind of want to do like 4 or 5 projects a year. Remasters or new ports and things like that. But anyways, System Shock 2, I'm not familiar with it. Like, I had never played the original. I said this last week. It is more RPG. So like for our website purposes, it does have like some stats and skills that you get to select, and even almost like a class system that you choose. I'll have my preview up in the next couple of days, but I grew up in the 90s. I grew up at like the end of the DOS era, beginning of the Windows era. This game basically slots in there very nicely. Even though I've never played it, when I started playing the demo at GDC, it felt very familiar and comfortable in a way, because like, yes, this feels like a game from the 90s. And the way that Larry put it was, we want these games, especially the remasters, we want them to feel like what you remember from back then without necessarily actually playing like you remember. Stuff with small things like controls or UI or things like that. One of the examples they used was in the original System Shock. You could not control the camera with your mouse. But you can in the remake. And that was one of those things where it's just like, yes, it's a new edition, but it's one of those things like coming to it now, you sort of assume and expect it. And things like that. But one thing he also said is, let me see if I can find it in my interview here. Here we go. They didn't want to add too much. So the thing with System Shock, and Brian would understand since you played the original, is that like it is pretty light on like waypointing, tutorials, like hand holding, things like that. And they didn't want to add too much in terms of quality of life there. And he actually brought this up kind of spontaneously. He was saying that, I'll just quote him here. It's fair to say in those days, the assumption about players' abilities and playthroughs is that they would be able to figure things out without necessarily being explicitly told. Like you'll learn that you probably don't need to pick up every coffee cup you run across because you can, and you learn that you have resources that you have to manage, and you have to manage them carefully, and things like that. So he finds that people like appreciate these kind of components to their games, and he doesn't want to change things too much. So kind of this whole like, how do we update it? How do we keep them faithful? That's their approach. And so read that once it's up.
Yeah, definitely. Like, I'm appreciative as someone who didn't play the original, just played the first remake, which this, like we kind of said, the first one was remake, this was remastered. Having someone have a light touch and not an overhanded touch in terms of updating these games as they were, but for a modern audience, trying to thread that needle, not compromising it in the sake of buffing out too much of the the edges to make it something that's not recognizable to what it was.
But yeah, I was actually playing the demo, and it plays a little differently from System Shock 1, the remake. And I was actually like kind of playing the demo. He and Grover were watching me play it, and like there aren't a lot of tutorials. I was like, okay, how do I open the menu? Tab, I am, like I'm pressing different keys, and like, okay, here's the menu, and I'm talking to myself, like, okay, here's my inventory, here's my equipment, here's my stats. Like, oh, how do I equip the gun? I just drag it over here. Oh, okay. And then Larry even said, like, I actually have, let me find it here real quick. Sorry. He says, like, I have endless enjoyment from watching people learn how to play this game. So, so that's kind of the approach that I took, and that's kind of the approach that they're taking when, they want people to play this, is that, like, it's faithful to what it was. And again, play how you remember it playing, even though not necessarily how it actually played.
Yeah.
So yeah, look forward to the interview / preview, or however you decide to container it, up on RPGsite.net when Adam gets that published. And of course, we kind of already talked about all the other previews that James has put up, that Aaron's put up, and there's a few more that I know that are in the works. So we'll probably definitely be able to dive into a lot of those in the upcoming weeks, to go into more detail of those games, especially as those release dates, like as we get closer to the Guardians of Azuma release date in May, going into the preview and talking about that game. Before we go to the final set of news, which is going through the dates, there is one other feature up on the site that I actually didn't know that Maelle was working on. It's a primer. It's a beginner's guide to the Atelier series. Of course, we talked about Atelier Yumiya. I had blanked for a second. What was the new name? Atelier Yumiya a few weeks ago when it released, of course, just in the earlier in the month. Atelier has seen a resurgence ever since the Rise of trilogy was so successful. And we kind of talked about last week about it. This is the start of a new trilogy. We talked about like some people who are fringe of the series don't even realize that it's like subdivided into trilogies. And even then there's caveats like Sophie 2, things like that. So Maelle did a really good deep dive into like, what's the deal with this, with Atelier? How do the trilogies work? Which characters are like, tied together in that way? Where does Yumiya sit? Where does Ryza sit? So, and even like which platforms the games are available on, the DX versions of these games as they kind of get re-released on more modern platforms, how do those fit in? So we have kind of an evergreen kind of primer up on the site now, for those looking to be, introduced to the Atelier series or have recently been introduced with Yumiya or potentially Ryza. So the complete beginner's guide to the Atelier games from Mikhail put together. So definitely wanted to give that one as a shout out on the site. And I'm not sure if there's more to come, but I would not be surprised if we kind of make these kind of a feature of the site for more series going forward. So we're at the last leg of the podcast. So we just have a couple dates here. This is the first time we've covered this game. Traveler's Refrain. It's a story-driven indie game with like a musical theme to it. Is going to be releasing on PC on April 11th on Steam. Kind of gives me like Moonlighter / Crypt of the Necrodancer kind of vibes. Phantom Brave: The Lost Hero, of course, released on console just earlier this year in late January. We knew a PC port was coming, probably later, and we got a release date for it, and it's going to be releasing on PC on April 24th. And they, alongside the announcement, there was a release date announcement trailer that we have up on the site as well.
I don't know about this release date.
April
I feel
24th.
like the April 24th is the same day that 100 Line comes out, and the same day that Clair Obscur comes out. I just feel like, obviously, those games aren't going to be. Well, Clair Obscur might be big. I don't know, but they're. If you are NIS America and you have to choose a date for this game, like why April 24th? Like
the date was, it probably should have came out the same time as the console version.
I mean, probably yes.
That was a good time.
Like but let's just assume you had to release it later. Like why not like wait a week or 2 weeks? I just feel like April 24th is not. It'll be
3 to 4
good luck
months after. Yeah.
So good luck.
And everyone's and that's not even counting like people are still playing games that they missed out on earlier in the year too.
Right. Yeah.
It's tough out there. It's a very crowded first quarter.
Mm-hmm.
Best of luck to everyone.
Wuthering Waves is getting a Steam release on April 29th. Now, remind me, Wuthering Waves is on PC, but as a standalone client like Genshin. Is that the kind of status?
It has a standalone client and an Epic Game Store. It's also an Epic Game Store.
Oh, I didn't realize it was an Epic.
But it's kind of stupid because usually how these games with standalone clients go is like even though they're on like say Epic Game Store, you boot up the Epic Game Store version only for it to open up the client that would have been on the standalone client. So I assume that's how the Steam version is going to go too, because that's how it is for other games that have standalone clients on Steam. Is like you press the play button on Steam only for it to open up the client, the standalone client, because that's where all the actual patching is done. Is that because they already have a unified system to.
Well, I know that's how like
those.
Guild Wars 2, Final Fantasy 14, I think PSO2 New Genesis, like you can get those standalone or on Steam or Epic. But what happens is if you buy the game through something like Steam, then if you want to buy DLC expansions, microtransactions, or whatever, you're locked to it. You like maybe there's some different specifics, but I know for Final Fantasy 14, they're like, don't get on Steam, otherwise you're married to Steam. And for Guild Wars 2, if you get the expansions on Steam, you can't. If ArenaNet on their own website has a sale, you can't get it there. You have to get it on Steam. So I wonder if there's going to be similar concessions to something like Wuthering Waves, or maybe there already are on the Epic.
The only like things that you kind of get out of like getting it from a separate client, for example, like Steam Playtime, for example. If you wanted to start tracking your playtime and let Steam do it, because there's no good other way to like track your Steam or your playtime in general. Yeah, you can do it there. Microtransactions, if you're trying to get more currency, you'd be able to like use like your Steam wallet, for example, but now that's taxable. Because let's say you live in Washington State, for example, that has like a separate like tax on things on top of what you're buying already. So it's actually going to be more expensive to buy that microtransaction on Steam because you have an additional tax on top of it. And meanwhile, if you were going to get the microtransaction, let's say under your standalone client, what the set price is, they're going to make up for it like already. So let's say like I get like a $60 microtransaction thing on Steam, that'll be a little bit more expensive because there's a state tax on top of that. when you're going to the Steam client, where if you were trying to get on their standalone client, it's going to be a set $60 on it with tax. So like it's gonna that price is hard locked on their standalone client. You don't have to deal with like state tax through Steam, for example, on that through their standalone client, because that tax is already part of that base price calculated on that end for them. Just stuff like that, you know. I don't know why I know this, but I've experienced it, so maybe that's why I know it. But yeah, that'd be the main reason is like Steam playtime. If they added Steam achievements and Steam like portfolio or wallpaper or stuff like that, maybe I guess that could be an added benefit too. So it's all just like, is there any real reason to move over to Steam if you're already playing Wuthering Waves on their standalone client? Probably not. But if you really want that playtime progress, um, then you'd probably move, I guess, play it on there. But if you want like if you're spending money for like microtransactions in it, you're probably going to boot up the standalone client, whether it's on you're doing it on mobile or the separate PC client, because you don't want that additional tax if Steam is taxable in wherever you live.
And it's probably more slated for people who are very embedded in the Steam ecosystem and don't see
Yeah,
outside of it. So getting the new
absolutely.
players in.
Yeah, that too.
Apparently, May 8th is a big day for indie games. So I have 3 games here listed that are coming out on May 8th. I think they're all on PC. No, they're all on PC, but some are on some other consoles. I'll go in order here. Creature Keeper is a monster-taming RPG, an indie game with like a very cutesy kind of Saturday morning cartoon art style, releasing on PC on May 8th. It was originally supposed to release back in 2023, but got delayed a few times. We have a Sandbox RPG Pixelshire. This looks like it's kind of in that Stardew Valley, Fields of Mystria kind of realm. So this is releasing on PC as well as on basically every console: PS4, PS5, Switch, Xbox Series, even Xbox One on May 8th. And finally, Empyreal, Empyreal, Empyreal. Action RPG kind of gives me like those unfortunately like Elex sort of vibes.
Yo, Elex is back. Let's go.
I like Elex 1. Oh, you did play this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's releasing also on May 8th, Xbox, PlayStation, PC.
Is this an Elex
Any
like?
one sentence comments on this?
It's like a mission-based action RPG where it's the interesting part about it is that like you will get drops as you go through the game, and the drops are like, this is weird to talk about. It's called a cartogram, and the cartogram is like a new map, and it's like a if you think about like action RPGs of like the PSP era, like there's like these missions that you go through where they're like little bite-sized levels that you go through. You beat the level, fight some enemies, get some drops, fight the boss, then you kind of like are done. It's actually kind of like that sort of design where you're fighting enemies, you get a drop, and a drop is a cartogram, and that's like a randomized level. Now, the developer I talked to wanted to emphasize that the levels themselves are not procedurally generated, but it's like a handmade bespoke level with like the randomizers and stuff on top of it are the like the loot tables and the enemy tables and things like that are somewhat randomized, and like you go through the levels, you get these drops, and then like go through these little dropped levels that you get, and it's kind of like this sort of like loot based gearing up action
It
RPG
kind of reminds me
game.
a little bit of Path of Exile then, because like in Path of Exile, there's like you run maps at that end game, and there's like even though like the maps are procedurally generated, that like they're different modifiers, different enemies, and you get like loot out of them to continue building, whatever build you're striving for. But there is an element of like, hey, you're getting pieces to construct a map and run that map for loot.
So the sort of idea is like rather than like beating a boss and or beating an enemy and being like, oh, I needed this pair of gloves or whatever, like you get a level, and then like the level, if you look at the loot table, it'd be like, oh, this level that I picked up that I can now use I know it's kind of weird to think about. You use a level to go into it to like, well, this loot table has like gloves on this level, so maybe I can get a better pair of gloves here or whatever. Or like, oh, I needed a drop from this sort of enemy, which this randomized level that I got will have it. So that's kind of the interesting twist to it. I will say that the demo I played was like not very well balanced. It was kind of like throws you into the middle of the game, and it's kind of like it was almost, it felt like a beta test. Um, but anyways, it's kind of interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Later in May, we have the Western release for Death's End Request Code Z. This is kind of the sequel / spin-off to the Death End Request. It's a sequel, but it's a different gameplay style. It's a roguelike instead of a command-based game. I know this was kind of when it was first announced. One of the primary focuses is that it got a 0Z rating because of like gory, very mature endings. So I assume it'll be M in the West. So I'm not 100% sure. It was originally going to release on Switch, but the Switch version in the West. So it's on Switch in Japan, but will not release on Switch in the West. And the physical release of in the West has been delayed, but it'll release digitally on May 13th, physically on June 27th.
Yo,
And
boob mouse
physically,
pads are back on the menu, huh?
yep, that's the collector, a limited edition.
The limited
There you go.
edition has like this boob mouse pad on it. I just opened it like, oh, that's back on the
Yep.
menu. Let's go.
Mhm.
Just what the people wanted.
Mhm.
Along with a trading card, an official soundtrack, and collector's box, and art book if you care about that. But you don't care about any of those. You want the boob mouse.
Mhm. One minor correction. I guess the physical edition is only delayed in Europe.
Mm.
So if you're getting the physical edition in Europe, you'll have to wait till June. And then the last thing here is Monster Hunter related. On the 25th, so a few days from this recording, we're having a Monster Hunter Wild showcase covering what's going to come in Title Update 1, which we already talked about. I think a lot of this was already detailed. You already knew that Mitsuhine was coming to Monster Hunter Wilds, Mitsuzune, and they'll go like I'm not exactly sure like what additional details they'll provide because we already know like what's been slated in the roadmap, but they'll at least give it a little bit of a showcase on the 25th.
I hope Mizutsune is cool. I mean, we've seen it in Rise. I forgot if it was in Ice World or Ice. I don't think so. I think it was in Rise. Um, I hope there's something more substantial than just showing off Mizutsune though. They
It
said
was
that
in
there's
Rise, so
yeah, they said there's the other new additions, but I'm hoping that's like there's more monsters on like besides Mizutsune in this title update. Just bonus announcements, I guess. Obviously they slate the patch at the Gathering Hub. Man, they need more content for that game. That's TLDR. They need more content in that game.
I'm like I still have to catch up, so I'm okay if it takes a while. Oh, and I guess we already know that the title update is coming early April, so maybe they'll probably give us a date. I guess.
Yeah.
So and that covers us for this episode. So that was a fun episode. We had a pretty large cast at the start. Like Adam said, it's not often that we get to have two big major releases and kind of very different major releases to talk about at length, and having people from within our site and guests on the podcast being able to talk to length about both of those.
Yeah, thank you for
Next
everyone
week,
who joined us. I know a lot of them had to log up, but thanks you to Hayes, to Mikhail, to Josh Tolentino, and to Chow who had to step out as well for joining us previously. It was action packed. Yeah, as you said, huge amount of stuff to talk about. But thanks to them for making time. Wherever they live, to join us for a bit, talk about them.
so next week it looks like the big two things will be First Berserker Kazan and AI Limit, though I'm not sure Junior will. I know he has a time zone concern as well. But maybe we'll have a review we can at least point to for that game. But it's only coming out in a couple days. Were you gonna say something, Adam? Oh, okay. So those are the big two releases for next week, and then of course the week after that, everything Switch 2. Which whenever Nintendo has any sort of showcase, we seem to be very busy because they seem to have a lot of games that fit our scope, whether that's Monolith Soft or otherwise. I'm sure we'll be talking about that in just a couple weeks, so it doesn't slow down. Um, I've kind of called out all the different features, previews, interviews on the site several times throughout this podcast. At the highlight, of course, Assassin's Creed Shadows review in progress and the Xenoblade Chronicles Cross Definitive Edition review up on the site. Go to rpgsite.net and check those out. Join the Discord, discord.gg/RPG site. Search for RPG site on all the social media networks, and you should be able to find us and follow us there. If you listen to this podcast, whether it's directly on the site page or through the podcast app of choice, Spotify, YouTube, whatever, give us a thumbs up, give us a rating. We love to see those. And until you hear from us next time on the next episode of the Tetracast, stay safe, take care, and we'll talk to you next time.